Okay, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Paranormal Roundtable. I'm your host, Josh Turner, and you can call me Wolf. Or not. I don't care. So, yes, the Astros won the World Series. I predicted it. I said it was going to happen 4-2, and it did. I'm not a wizard. I don't practice wizardry. I just know baseball and football. And so, and basketball, hockey to a lesser degree. But those are my two main sports. But yeah, that's what's going on. Astros took it in 6 games. And a credit to them. Somebody said, yeah, I was rooting for the good guys. I'm like, you rooting for Philly? Philadelphia, they're the good guys?
In what world is anything pertaining to that city?
Did you see their players? They actually looked like they were coming from robbing a 7-Eleven. I mean, honestly, I'm not joking completely. I'm joking, but I'm not totally joking. They kind of looked like Thugs R Us, dude. I mean, they looked homeless, dude. The one guy that looked kind of like he wasn't homeless, the little Cabbage Patch head guy, Schwarber.
Yeah.
He just looked like an angry guy who probably, I don't know. He looked like he went home and threw liquor bottles around the house when he was done because he was just like, because he hates the Astros because he's with the Yankees and they ate his lunch there with and then now he's with the Phillies and now he has to go and watch them celebrate again. So my apologies to Kyle Schwarber, whatever your name is. Yeah, Kyle Schwarber for picking on you, dude. But not like you give a crap about my opinion. You make $1 billion a year to play a kids game, so whatever. But the bottom line is, in the losing effort, he's the one that got the home run, and he was like throwing the bat, like yeah, and then it was like, it's like calm down, dude. Okay, you're at the kids' table. Okay, but you can have some more cranberry sauce if you'd like. Would you like some more, Kyle? Would you? No, Kyle's angry. Yeah, I'm in my feelings, and I can understand. I wish that they used to do this thing after the World Series and the Super Bowl where they would go to it was terrible. I remember this as a kid. They would go to the losing team's locker room to get their feelings and opinions. You're like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
So I guess they finally quit doing it because I'll never forget the NFC Championship game where the 49ers cheated. The league wanted them in there. And I'm not joking. They cheated. Okay? Here in Texas, at the mall we had here in Austin, there was a picture for years that hung up in a sports store over there in Barton Creek Mall with Deion Sanders literally holding Michael Irvin's arms behind his back like this while the ball is falling in front of him. And I saw that camel-faced goofball Deion on TV did it. I never liked him, even when he played for us. He's like a necessary evil. And no, I don't like him. But he was up there talking about, it wasn't no laundry. It wasn't no laundry. Of course there's not. They're not going to throw a flag. They wanted you guys to win, mercenary. And that's what he was, just a mercenary.
Oh, yeah, the 49ers built a
team just to beat Dallas.
And broke the salary cap specifically to beat Dallas.
Yeah, they did.
And never faced any kind of
consequences or anything.
But
they did years later. Yeah, they did. Years later, common policy, they faced like fines or something. They got in a little trouble.
Ooh.
And then Eddie DeBartello sold the team once he was getting under a bunch of heat. And but it was like years later. They had already won. They hired like I think 14 hired guns basically for that one season. 14 starters that they got, like just to beat Dallas. Like it was an entire defense. They scrapped their entire defense. I think with the exception of Romanowski. I think Romanowski actually left on his own, but everybody else they were there to beat Dallas, and so it was basically a mercenary team, So when you think about it, yeah, the 49ers beat the Cowboys, but was it really the 49ers or was it a bunch of hired guns? Because that's what they did. And the Yankees do it every year too. The one thing I could say about those Cowboys teams that were winning back then and these Astros teams is that they're all homegrown. We have very few free agents. The Cowboys utilize very few free agents, and the Astros did too. The Astros built them from the ground up. Their farm system brought them up, and they have a pitching like a machine. I mean, you're not going to win against a team with like the Astros that had the depth of pitching. They at one time could have put 6 or even 7 starters out there pitching. And their bullpen was super deep, and the bullpen just wasn't deep for the Phillies. And so a bunch of people have been messaging me about that because they said, oh, congratulations, but blah, blah, blah. Y'all cheated in 2017. Well, here's the thing. The Yankees did it too. Yankees got their record sealed, and then after that, the Red Sox got caught. And then they said if anybody else gets caught, then they're going to face harsher consequences than the Astros got caught. But back when I was young and playing baseball, sign stealing was just part of the game. Like you tried to figure out what the coach was with the signs that they were giving each other. So if it gave you an edge, it was just like, oh, we figured out their signs, and it was just part of it. But I guess they wanted it to be, not part of the game. So I don't know. They changed it to where in the major leagues they just didn't want anybody doing it. Yankees got caught, got the record sealed. Now they're all up in arms because the records got released by the New York Post. Go look it up. And so they still cry. But it is what it is. Somebody says here Jerry Jones beats the Cowboys every year. No, the refs do. And if you go and you look at the penalties, 16 penalties last year when they played the Niners, and the Niners had 4, you going to tell me that's all they did? They only committed 4 penalties? Really? Cowboys get called for everything all the time, across the board. They rarely get away with anything. It does happen, but not very often. If you do something and you're a Texas team, you're going to get called. And I think it goes beyond just sports because if you think about it, folks, and this is what I'm going to tell you, this is what this has to do with tonight's show, is you all come together for something. You come together for, to create something or to be something, do something, whatever. Sports is one of those things that can bring a nation together. The World Cup is coming up, right? And everybody at that time falls in line behind their particular country, saying, "Hey, I'm a Brazilian. I'm a German. I'm an Englishman. or English woman, whatever. I'm an American. I'm a United States, whatever." It galvanizes countries. Why do you think that during the Cold War, the Soviet Union was so determined, and we beat them in hockey, and it was such a big deal? It was a huge deal. Like, it was a big freaking deal.
Yeah, I mean, sports has always been sports and just generally nonviolent competition has always been very important for like societal unity, because if you don't give people something to have in common, they're gonna find something. They're gonna focus on their differences. I mean, it's just human nature.
And folks, I'm actually talking to 2 ghosts.
Yeah, this is Paranormal Roundtable.
If you look at the chairs, they're empty for a reason, folks. That was not a screw up on our computer part. That was 2 ghosts that we were talking to.
Actually, it could be ghosts or it could be vampires.
There we go.
Yeah, because if we were ghosts, you'd see us right now, but I guess we're vampires.
Now you're vampires.
Yeah.
Now the reflection. And this is the cube. What is that right there? What is this? What are we doing here?
This is the
see, because on camera it looks white, but folks, it looks pink on. It looks like an Energon cube from Transformers. Pick it up.
This is the lament configuration from.
You open the box.
Yeah, from Hellraiser.
Whatever you do, don't spill it on that bang.
Yeah. Oh no, I spilled it on the bang.
But anyways, it doesn't have any color. I need my
it's supposed to be flashing,
there.
but I guess it's not working right.
Okay. Do you need this? Yeah. Okay. All right. Anyways, Josh Turner at prtpodcast.com. That is the email address, Josh Turner at prtpodcast.com. Patreon.com/prtpodcast. That's how you can join the Patreon. Now, if you are a Patreon member, you guys know what to do. I've already told you how you can get your swag. I'll tell you again. You go to the Patreon, you sign up, $20 tier is automatic, $10 tier it's 3 months, and then you get your swag. Now, we picked some winners for Halloween. I'm in the process of moving, folks, okay? Or I should say packing, because at the end of the month, I'm moving. So it is going to be very, very difficult. And we're going to try and make every show this month, but we may have to cancel at some point. So be looking for an update if we have to cancel, because we have to do things. We have things we have to do. We have to work, and we have to move. Moving's not fun. But hopefully once we get it done, yeah. And 39 Seanman, it says, stealing signs is part of the game, but trash cans and electronic devices aren't okay. Hey, remember when SMU football? Yeah, I'm not an SMU fan. But, yeah, you're comparing that. The Yankees.
He does make a good point. Like a few comments down, though. He says the Northeast hates Texas when it comes to sports. Ain't
Yeah,
that the truth?
and I'm going to get to this. I was going to get to this, okay. Seanman, the thing is, the Yankees did it, and so did the Red Sox. So, I mean, they didn't face the punishments that the Astros did. And the media just completely focused on us because we're Texas. And folks, there's it goes deeper. I mean, it goes way deeper. When you want to suppress someone, the last thing you want is their teams winning, because baseball, football, basketball, hockey, all these things, they bring people together of every race, every religion, every gender, and they go under one banner. And if a Texas team wins, then it's, I believe that there are certain powers that view Texas as a threat. Texas was once its own country. Texas also, if you remember 10, 12 years ago, was talking about secession. Now, just a couple years ago, I read a poll, and all of the entire state had basically said that they thought that secession would be an okay or good thing, whatever, except for the Austin area. The Austin area and the county around there, Travis, and, they were against it, when nearly every other county in the state was like, yeah, they didn't say they wanted to, but they said they wouldn't be opposed to it. Of course, everyone in Austin is not from Austin. Literally 90% of this city, because when I moved here, there was like 150,000 people or something like that. Now there's 1 million. Okay? So 90% of this city is not from here. They're from some other place. And not just California. California, yeah, there's a lot of California, but a lot of Chicagoites, Chicago, whatever you want to call them, Chicagonites, whatever. They're from here. There's a lot of them here. We got a bunch of people from the Northeast. We got a few from the Southeast, but most of them come here to be a certain way, to because they have a political agenda, so they all just come here. But now a lot of people are coming here just because of the cheapness compared to where they're at. But now it's becoming super expensive, and so it's really slowed down because of how expensive it is. It's just as expensive as where they're from. I will say this. The problem with a city like Austin that's very open and pretty much, giving and all this other stuff, you have people who you can easily like come here and just be yourself or whatever. That was the key. I mean, it was like, hey, you can go to Austin and start over and be weird and nobody's really going to mess with you. That's not the case anymore. And the crime is through the roof. And I'm not joking. I'm not making that up. We have had gunshots big time on our sites. And then we had a stabbing on one of our patrol properties. What did Kim say? It was like 2 nights ago.
Yeah, just about.
Somebody was stabbed to death. I mean, it's just, and then another person was runned over in one of our parking garages and smushed or something. It's not like it's what it was. It's not the city that it once was. It's very crime riddled now, and we have defunded the police. So people figured that out, and so they come here and they act a freaking fool. It's not like it used to be. Used to be the kind of liberalism that when then Austin was I could deal with it. It was like, you be you and I do me, and it's just like it's okay. You do whatever you want to do. It's not the way it is now. It's like this militant, whatever. It's like you have to be like me or else. And the criminals seem to have free reign here. It's gotten to where it's almost like, criminality has just taken over, and normalcy is taking a back seat, which is creating a lot of problems. But here's the thing, folks. I want to tell you guys, the Paranormality Awards happened, right? Somehow, I guess for the month of October, I guess it was, we were the number 2 podcast, paranormal podcast. We came in second place.
Yep.
You're welcome.
And we still didn't win our category. And the guy that won the category, I don't know his name, but he's from Monsters Among Us. I don't know who that is. Look up, see who that was that won. Congratulations to him. I mean, he won. I don't know the guy. I don't know anything about him. But I was like 99.9% sure that I wasn't going to win that because I'm just pretty sure I'm not their cup of tea. I mean, let's put it that way. I think it's more about like kind of vibing with them, you know. I don't really know the people that run that, so that's a testament to our show and our fan base that we were even nominated. And it's a testament to our fan base that went out and voted or whatever. If that even counts, I don't know. I have no idea. But I would suspect that it's probably never going to be something that we're going to be able to do. And I say that with all due respect to whoever's in charge over there. I don't even know. But I can kind of get the vibe from watching their awards. Like I was told by Lyle, hey, check it out. There's an awards thing. He won his category. So we came in second overall, which was weird. We were the number 2 pot, but then we didn't win the 40 category. Monsters Among Us.
So the host name of Monsters Among Us is Derek Hayes.
That's Derek Hayes. Okay. That's the one that Charlie Perez was promoting, saying, you haven't heard him, you haven't heard squat, even though he was actually supposed to be doing business with me at the time. But that's Charlie for you. Charlie has no loyalty, and he did steal my logo to put on his toys that he makes or whatever. So, you know, credit to him. Great job, Derek. I don't know you. I'm sure you're a great guy. I have no idea. I'm not going to talk trash about you. But it just seems like the kind of deal that, you know, and so we're going to put that behind us, and we're not going to worry about them. We're not going to even care. We don't care. I didn't say anything about it last week because I didn't even bother to look. And so I was just like, you know, who cares? I'm going to do what I do. You folks at home do what you do. And the heck was that?
Remotes, I guess.
All right. And we're going to just keep doing what we do.
I mean, ghost, boo, spooky.
Spooky. A spooky ghost knocked something over in the lab here. Okay. So I promised you last week, guys, that I was going to continue with the stories. That's why we're not going to have a guest tonight. Okay. I'm waiting for the chat to fill up a little bit more, and I want to get into some stuff. We're going to talk about some, because this show is not the live stream. People think that I'm here to just tell you a bunch of stories. And I'm here to tell you that's not what the live stream is. It never started out that way. It was to be a companion to the hour-long episodes. But the lackluster performance of some of the episodes has kind of put me a little gun-shy. If you or someone you know that you love is still waiting for me to drop episodes on the other podcast platforms, please, if not for them, you know, do it for yourself. Make yourself feel better by enlightening them. And tell them, hey, look, dummy, okay? They're no longer there, okay? So what we're going to have to do, me and Tony, right, we're going to have to do an episode, one of our hour-long episodes, and drop it on the YouTube and the other podcast platforms and scream literally every 10 minutes, this is the last show we're going to do on these podcast platforms. We are no longer going to be on these platforms, folks, okay? And we're just going to have to keep beating it into their spotted heads and their appled heads and their Googled heads and whatever, and tell them, look, we are going to be on YouTube, on the tube of the U. Yes, that is where we will be. Because apparently they just cannot understand. And then some people give me these ridiculous, I can't listen to it on YouTube. Okay, you could easily plug in headphones or Bluetooth and listen to YouTube. I do it all the time. Like, how is that not possible? Well, I don't use headphones, but I mean, I listen to it on YouTube. Now, you could do the YouTube Premium, which is like $12 a month. I know that's a little steep for some people, apparently. But if you don't want to do the $12, $13 a month to get no commercials and unlimited whatever, which for me, it's worth it because I watch a lot of YouTube, my own shows because I got to critique myself. I don't watch myself for entertainment, trust me. I'm in there kind of aggravated because of this or that, and I try to critique myself because that's, I think, what a good show host should do. So I don't want to look at commercials, so I do the YouTube Premium. Now, here's the thing. If you can't do that, okay, we put very limited commercials on here. All right. You don't have to see me. If you want to hear the live stream, just play it. I mean, you're here for the content of the audio, really. I mean, you want to just look at me talking? I mean, that's up to you. Why does the chat keep flying like that? Chairman Meow Te Tung, thank you for the donation. It's a very clever name there,
I didn't
too.
even see his name.
Thank you so much. That's pretty cool. So last week we left off. Now there were 3 stories. One of my wife had let the cat out of the bag, no pun intended, and it was about a giant and a black hellhound, which was a very weird story that we got. One of the people told me, they said, "Why do people feel comfortable giving you a really crazy story?" Because I had a what do you call it, a colleague of mine, and he said these people don't want to give me. And I said, well, for one thing, your show, his show in particular, is based more on cryptids. And I said, I think people come to me because they know that I'm willing to talk about the esoteric, you know. I'm willing to talk about that part of it that people tend to leave out. Now, if you want to listen to a really good interview, go to Dark Water's channel and listen to him interview Lyle Blackburn. Both of them are very good friends of mine. I just talked to Dark a couple days ago. We had a good talk, and we prayed together. He prayed with me. He's a good guy. He's really, and even if you didn't like him before, Dark he's really trying spiritually. I mean, he's turned a corner. Okay, he's like me. He's just angry. We get hot-headed, and we get in our emotions and stuff. And it's understandable because we had people who would mess with us, you know. And so I'm going to turn this so I can move it upward a little bit. Can you turn it? There you go. And then I'm going to move up a little bit right here. There we go. Now I feel like a big boy. So one of the things that I wanted to say, though, about Dark Waters is that I think he's grown like I have, and he's come a long ways. And listening to him and Lyle talk, it's interesting because I've spent a lot of time talking to both of these men, and they did a very good interview together. I think Dark Waters and Lyle both do really good work. And Lyle opened up and he talked about some of the paranormal aspects of these things because I think he's starting, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lyle, and if I am, feel free to text me and complain and I will ignore it. But the thing is, you know, I think that Lyle is starting to branch out a little bit and starting to say, hey, man, you know, there's some weird stuff out there. A lot more than you would expect someone that's in the mainstream. And Lyle has definitely gone mainstream. He's on TV all the time, him and Ken both. You know, and now you're seeing Barton everywhere. They're all over the place, these guys. I can't keep up with them. Dark Water, same thing. But I like these guys. These are the guys I chill with. These are the guys that I'm cool with. And I root for these guys, and I want these guys to succeed. And I like that my name is associated with these guys. These are the guys that I look at as the winners. You know, they're actually out there. They're doing stuff. They're making waves. They're making hellified content, writing books. Another guy that I like a lot, I've talked very highly of many times on the show, is David Weatherly. I love his work. I love his books. He just does a good job. And he's smashing it with these 50 states. I think he's up to like 12 now or something like that. And then, of course, Nick Redfern is another good friend of mine. But when they interact, it's interesting. I love to listen to them talk. I like to hear what they have to say, the questions, the answers, everything going back and forth. It's a really good interview. You should check it out. I have no stake in it. Nobody's paying me to promote that. It's just 2 really good friends of mine, and I like what they were talking about. And it was Lyle talking about his new book, but also, you know, being interviewed by Dark Waters, which I think that's the first time he was ever interviewed by him. But it's pretty good, and they both do good work. So go check them out. So when we last left off, we talked about this werewolf story. Now, what we have here, we have a werewolf story. It's a really good one, I think. We have 2 of them, but one in particular is really good. And then we have one about a cloaked creature, which is it's a weird story. I don't know how to. It's just weird. And then we have another one about a giant. So I'm going to let you guys vote in the chat and tell me what you want to hear.
Well, while they're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and start thanking everybody that donated. Amy, David, and Carrie, thank you guys for your donations.
Okay, that was very interesting. I thought there was going to be more, but apparently that was it.
Oh, those are all the donations.
I'm just waiting to see what people are gonna want in the chat.
Yeah, I'm seeing werewolf, giant.
Okay, Alex, up to you to keep count.
Okay, Giants winning so far.
Yeah.
Somebody said Weird Dog Man. I never said Weird Dog Man, Amy. Wake up!
Giant followed by werewolf. Weird Dogman falls into that category, I guess.
Has anybody in the chat seen that show, The Watcher? Like,
Did y'all finish it?
yeah, we finished it. It was on Netflix.
Yeah, it's a good show.
It was a good show, but somebody had said that I read something that it was like loosely based, or it was based on a true story, or
Yeah,
something.
like the actual story itself isn't as
Dramatic.
dramatic as it was on the TV show. Like what happened was these people moved into this house. They started getting these letters. Now the letters that are read on the show are at least two of them, I think, are like the word for word or verbatim the same letters that the people in real life got.
Oh, yeah,
And
I know
then,
about
but
this.
they got spooked and then moved out. And I think the tenants that moved in after them, they haven't had that problem. So I think it was just them. Somebody in the neighborhood just
didn't like
them
them.
and wrote these creepy letters that were purposely worded
Oh.
like that.
Well, it's...
And they made a movie out of it.
Those
Yeah.
the two BuzzFeed guys, Sean and whatever, the Asian guy and the white guy, they they watched, they did that episode, or they did an episode on The Watcher. That's how I remember it,
Oh,
because
okay.
that's how I learned it from them.
Because I was thinking, like, for the rest of the episode, I'm just going to talk like this for the whole show. Now, here's what happened. I think that was the creepiest part. Was just
Yeah,
the voice,
that voice was like
that androgynous
Well, I
voice.
haven't
Like,
seen it, so that's I didn't.
it's just like, okay, so I don't like you living here. The way you colored your house is terrible. Pastel, really? It's almost Christmas. I mean, I don't know. I just thought that was weird. I was like, the people kept complaining about like their house. And so the funny thing is, I was like, what would happen if they did that to us? Like, we're moving into a nice neighborhood. We're going into a big house. Imagine if the neighbors started doing that to us. The joke would be on them because we wouldn't give a crap.
Wow, that'd be funny.
We probably wouldn't even.
I'd write back.
We probably wouldn't even open the letter. We'd just be like, "What's this? I don't know what this is." Toss it out.
We would probably never even read
that
it.
letter would never see the light of day, and then they'd just be sending one after the other, getting frustrated.
We would probably eventually write back. I mean, if that's the worst you could do is write some letters
Yeah.
to us.
And then the other show, Nope. Like you want to talk about the laziest title that I've ever heard of in a show.
Nope, I haven't heard of it.
I mean, like, if you're going to make a movie and you're going to talk about whatever subject it is, why would you call it Nope? Or Yep? Or, I mean, like, Nope? You know, it's such a childish, just silly.
I think that's another Jordan Peele movie, isn't it?
It is, and
He needs to stick to being funny.
he is
Keegan-Michael
not
Key.
good. I don't know what to tell you about the guy. I mean, and it's like Samuel Jackson, Snakes on a Plane. You know, I mean, dude. I mean, some of these titles to these movies, they're so terrible that I would never watch them. And somebody asked me about that. They said, "Have you watched Nope?" And I'm like, "Why would I watch a show?" Of course, my response was Nope. Why would I watch a show called Nope? Just for the fact of the title alone. Let me tell you something. This is the kind of person I am. They used to have Pringles commercials. And when I was young, I actually liked Pringles. But guess what? For 20 years, I quit eating them because they were doing backflips and beating on the can and jumping around and throwing them in the air and spinning around. And I was a kid. And I'm going like, when on God's green earth are people actually doing this? So if we were to actually hold these commercial people and these idiots accountable, hold them accountable for their stupidity, the world would be a better place. I mean, really. And insurance commercials. Has anybody bothered to tell Limu, Emu, whatever to put? It's the terriblest. It's
Well, I mean, that's the point, is to make something so terrible that it just sticks in your mind and you can't get it out. That's why
I don't even remember the name of the company though. All I know is the Emu. That's all I know. I don't know anything
I
about
don't
the.
even know
Yeah,
what
they
you're
dropped
talking
the
about.
ball on that, but
whatever.
Geico had the right idea. Like, they have the worst, most obnoxious
The lispy
commercials.
British
Yeah.
lizard. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Oh, it's a tiny dance.
but it worked because it's
Squish
so
that, dude.
stupid and insulting.
Well,
that it
here's the
sticks in your
thing.
mind.
I was looking at insurance the other day, and you know this, Anthony. And Geico popped up, and I refused to go with them, even though they were $40 cheaper a month. That's a lot. $40 is quite a bit. But because I hate your commercials so bad, I'm willing to pay more.
Yeah, like at a certain point, commercials, TV shows, and movies, like either the writing or just the titles, they're so stupid that it's actually insulting to your intelligence. Like sometimes I take it personal, because it's like you really think your perception is that I'm that stupid that you can just name something this stupidly, and I'm gonna bite at that.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Or like you can be this lazy and make something this full of plot holes, and you're assuming my brain is just so dull that I'm gonna consider this entertaining. No.
Yeah. Well, we got 250 in the chat now. Let's get going, because I don't want everybody to be waiting around. I just try to get the chat filled up so we could tell these stories, and so, we got out what we had to say here. So let's start with this. Everybody was saying giant earlier, right? Was that the main?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'd
this
say
story,
giant
I'm
one.
going to tell you right now, this one, I kept saying it was KC, Kansas City, but it wasn't. My wife kept telling me, no, that was the guy's name. The guy's name was KC. He was a kid. And he was from East St. Louis, and he was an African-American kid, and when he was young, a black kid, I'm just being politically correct, whatever, for no reason. He's a black kid, and he was with a couple of his buddies, and they were told that there was a quote-unquote giant that was seen in the area near the railroad tracks. And he claimed that this was something that happened to him when he was a kid. Now, he's about my age, so this would have been like in the 80s when this took place. Now, he wasn't a child like a little kid, but he was, in his early teens, which is, you're still a kid. And so what ended up happening was they went down to the railroad tracks, and at the tracks there were these abandoned railroad cars. Now, some of the homeless people, that I guess they used to call them rail riders or hobos, and Anthony, you know about that because you're from Taylor.
Yeah.
We had certain areas that we were always told don't go play because the rail riders or the hobos lived down there. We didn't call them homeless people, we called them hobos. They rode around on the railroad, and we had a big railroad interchange right there by the cotton gins that we would ship cotton back and forth. Not me and Anthony personally. Our hometown, okay, it's known as Cottonland or Blackland because of the soil. The soil is black, rich. You can grow anything on it, and it's Cottonland. And so that soil that now they're building houses on is a travesty. You're sitting there going like, you can grow anything in the world on this soil, and you're going to build a house on it. And then the houses are now having foundation problems.
Houses are one of the silliest things you can build on black land.
They're
Yeah, you
literally
don't want to
sinking.
build on black land. It just going to destroy it. You have to anchor it in. Now, even in the streets in Taylor, it's a full-time job for them to keep the streets leveled, and everybody's like, your streets are terrible because it's basically built on farmland, and the streets are all uneven, and just the ground comes up and down. And so it's really bad. But here's the thing. He was with his friends, and they decided to go out, and they were out in the summertime riding their bikes, and they were told by another friend of theirs that there was a giant, an actual living, breathing giant that was staying in one of those railroad cars. And the rumor was that a couple people had gone missing, and that nobody would go down in there to mess with this giant. And that even when the police had gone, and this is what he told me, they were attacked by some sort of large creature. Now, these caps were attached by a large creature. He didn't say it was a giant. He just said it was a large creature. So he said, I think he said this happened like in 1982 or something 87, I think what he said. He's a little bit older than me, like I said. He's about my age, but, a few years older. And so what ended up happening was they went out there and they started throwing rocks. So for 2 days in a row in the summertime, I think he said he was 14 and his brother was 13 and their two friends were like 14 and 15. And they would take rocks, he said big old sharp rocks, and they would throw them at the railroad cars. And they were trying to get this giant or this creature, people kept calling it, to come out.
Well, that's smart.
Well, when you leave in East St. Louis, what else is there to do? You're talking about, football practice. A buddy of mine grew up over there, and he said that they actually practiced in they had to do their practice in a parking lot. Can you imagine football practice in a parking lot? Now, in Taylor, they had sticker patch. That was bad enough.
Yeah.
But, I can't imagine running routes in a parking lot with broken glass, and how are you going to tackle? It's crazy. So it is a very bad area, very bad place. So they were there, and they were throwing rocks at these railroad cars, and one of the railroad cars, they finally heard a noise. They heard a grumbling, rumbling noise, whatever. For whatever reason, the police were afraid to go and mess with this situation because supposedly they had been scared off or whatever. I have my own theory about that, which we'll talk about after I tell you the story, and I'll give you the whole 411 of why I think that was, because I have a theory about it. But here's what happened. They hear the noise, and they said, oh, there's somebody in the railroad car. Now, a couple times they did wake up some homeless people who were coming out and shaking sticks at them and stuff. They weren't giants. And he said, dude, one of my friends claimed to have seen this. He's like, straight up said he saw it. It looked like a giant. So they went throwing rocks at a railroad car, and they went down to the one where they heard the growling and the snarling, and they began to chunk the rocks at it. And eventually they heard this noise, and they saw this door slide open. And he said that they saw this weird dust come out of it that looked almost like green. It was almost like a green dust. And he said, dude, I was freaked out. He goes, I didn't know what to expect. I was thinking maybe it was an alien. He goes, I didn't know what to expect. He goes, and the first thing we see is the head of this large dog. And he said this dog is probably the size of 3 full-grown dogs. And so I told him, I said, now, 3 full-grown dogs, like what? He said, take your pick, a big dog. So I said, I had a massive that was about 130 pounds. He was a huge dog. And he said, okay, take a dog that size about 3 times, at least a 300 or 400 pound animal. And he said that there was this big chain that you could see some slack in it, and the dog came, its head stuck out, and it began to bark, but it wasn't like a normal bark. He said the bark on this thing was like a roar. He said it was like, if you go and sit next to a river and it's just like rapids. He said years later, when he was in Colorado, he sat next to a river that was just flowing. And he said that it reminded him of that dog, just like it was like a constant, like it didn't stop. And it reverberated through their bodies. Our little skinny bodies were like absorbing this sound. And he said that, he goes, and its eyes looked, like they wasn't red and piercing, glowing red eyes. He said it was just yellowish looking eyes, but they looked demonic. And he said, then we see this big hand that's holding the chain. And then we see an arm. He goes, literally, you could see it kind of moving around behind it. And he heard this weird language. He goes, I've never heard it ever before in my life and never heard it after that. And he said this thing stepped out off of the train car. And he said it was like that train car moved down and went back up. He said what he saw was he said this thing had to have been 8 or 9 feet tall and weighed at least 600-700 pounds. And he said, I'm talking with that and the dog. He goes, I bet you it was about 1,100 pound situation there, And he said this was an old broken down railroad car. And he said that the guy he was big. He had a big belly. He was a big barrel chest. And he said he was huge. His arms were huge. And he said he was like snapping his teeth like the dog was. He described the dog as a very hairy, shaggy dog with a very squared off head. He said if you took like a really shaggy, a Rottweiler, made it very shaggy, but with no brown in it, it was just gray and black. And he said, and I'm not joking, there was steam coming off of both of these people, of these entities. And he said, dude, at one point, they were so close to each other in the darkness, I couldn't tell if it was one entity or two. He goes, but it was definitely a guy holding a chain. And he said that the guy, when he opened his mouth, he said he yelled, he screamed some weird language. He said, he goes, at least, 30, 40 yards away, he goes, we could smell his breath. And then he goes, as he moved closer, we could smell blood, urine, wet dog, poop. The guy smelled like death. And I asked him, I said, he goes, and we ran. He goes, we took off. We got on our bikes and we were gone. He said, and we never, ever went back up there again. And he goes, over the next couple months, people were claiming to have seen this thing moving in and around that area. And it didn't stay in one particular spot. And there were some people who had gone missing at that time or whatever he had said. He said that there was and the police weren't really doing anything about it, and it was just a bad situation. And he said, dude, he was convinced that one of his childhood friends had literally ended up going crazy because he got chased by this guy down by the river. This dude let his dog go, and it chased him into the water. And he was a good swimmer. And the dog got about halfway across and was almost to him, and then that dude whistled, and it came back. And he said this was not a large man. And everything about this guy was gigantic. Now, the way he moved very fluid. It wasn't like someone with gigantism where they move and they're kind of like, it wasn't anything like that. He said, dude, it was just like an oversized guy. And I asked him, I said, what color was the hair? And he said, brownish red. That was his exact words.
The color of the hair on like when you have reports of giants, they're usually red-haired.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty common.
And now here's the thing about that. He said brownish red. He didn't say reddish brown. He said it was red hair with a tint of brown. That's the way he described it. Because I asked him, I said, it's interesting. Is this just, the way you're describing it is just, you meant to say brownish red, or did you mean to say reddish brown? He said, no, I would say it was red with brown tint. And then I told him, because he's not that much older than me, I was like, well, have you ever played Street Fighter? He said, yeah, I played it. I played Street Fighter 2 or whatever. And I said, have you ever seen the character Akuma? He did not. So I sent him a picture of what Akuma looked like. Now, you guys know I played the other day, and I was whooping y'all over there at pinballs.
Yeah.
But Akuma was basically, whatever. Akuma was Ken and Ryu's teacher's teacher, wasn't he, or something like that? He was evil back then.
Yeah, he was like, I don't know if they were either like what is it when like they're fellow disciples to another master?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's the bad guy. Supposedly, he beat Bison and he became the bad guy, or whatever. Because he's so tough. So, because I know in one of the Street Fighters, he comes out and he beats up Bison. Well, if you look at that guy, and he's like, when I sent him the picture of this, okay, we're going to get into some interesting stuff here. I'm going to tell you a lot of weird stuff. He said, dude, holy crap, that looks kind of like it. Kind of, he said the skin tone, was sort of a bronze-looking skin tone, almost Middle Eastern looking in the face. The hair was reddish brown, or brownish red, he said. And he said that it was a very striking image. Here's what he told me. He said, dude, for months after this situation, me and my brother had nightmares. We kept dreaming that dog was coming up to our window, and it was talking to us. And the dog was warning them and telling them, I'm going to eat you. I'm going to do all these crazy things, whatever. And then they started seeing this weird, large shadow moving around in their little apartment. And they eventually told their mother and their mom, even though it was like a month later, was very upset with him, rightfully so. And she was like, you boys went down there and you messed with something you should not have messed with. She didn't really know what was going on or what it was, but she punished them, and said, you guys, whatever. And so she eventually went to a woman that was known as a faith healer. That was a friend of the family's that they had known for years. She was able to, pray and do all kinds of stuff. And it seemed to help some, but it didn't really, the haunting that took hold in their apartment didn't end. And eventually they moved into another place, and then it seemed to slow down and it stopped, whatever. Long story short, this was a giant. Okay? This was an actual giant, what they believe was a giant. Here's what I'm going to tell you. I believe that these creatures, they have a connection, and I've been doing a lot of deep diving, studying on the Middle East here lately, and one of the things that I can tell you right now is that I believe that there is a connection between red-haired individuals from Ireland and giants, red-haired giants from the Middle East. And I don't mean just like the giant of Kandahar. I'm talking about like Afghanistan. If you go back into the history of Ireland, Mauritania and Ireland. Okay, now let me explain to you Mauritania. Mauritania is like Morocco, Algeria, that area. That was a region. It was called Mauritania until colonialization took hold. Now, going back before the Arabs were there. Yes, I said before the Arabs were there because they weren't always there. Before that, there was a culture that was there. What was there before that, Anthony? Do you know?
I don't know.
The Berbers.
Okay.
The Berber culture, I thought you would know that because of the other day when we got the cologne from the, and that was, well, it was probably about 2 years ago, you're with me, and that lady from Morocco, and I said, she's Berber, and she was shocked that I knew her. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Two different things. They're both Bedouins, but they're not the same people. Berber, after the Moorish invasions, after the Islam took hold in the Middle East, the Moorish invasions took place, and that's when the Arabs gained a strong foothold in the North African region. Before that, Tunisia and all these, they were pre-Islamic cultures. They had gods that later became demons and blah, blah, blah. But there were legends of these giants. Egypt was plagued by a people called the Sea People. Now, eventually I'm going to do a show about it, maybe get into it, do a deep dive on there. I've already done the dive, but I can give you the information. They were said to have part of their army was made up of giants. It's a very weird thing. Now, you have a type of people in Ireland that are not, they don't claim Irish heritage. They claim that they're from somewhere else. And they are supposedly originally from the Middle East, and they call themselves travelers. Now, the same thing in England. Think of Tyson Fury. He calls himself the Gypsy King. Gypsies in England and Ireland are not the same genetically as the Roma gypsies of the mainland Europe. It was not as easy for them to migrate to England and Ireland as it was for them to be on the mainland. You did have some bands of them, but once they were kicked off the islands, they were not able to gain a foothold like they did in mainland Europe. And the Roma can easily be traced back to the Indus Valley, which would be somewhere in between Pakistan and India, going back to about the 9th century AD. That's when we first see them appear. They were just travelers. They were like a type of Indian people, and they just migrated into Europe and into the Middle East. And they, but you have different groups of them. You had the Bedouins of Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Qatar, all those regions, and then you had them all the way up into North Africa. There were always roving bands of Arabs, but they were not there in force until after the Moorish invasions, about 100 to 150 years after the death of Muhammad. Now, when you look at the stories in the Hadith, which is the companion to the Quran, you get all these weird esoteric stories. Go read the codices. You get the Gospel of Mary, all these different stories about giants. It's really interesting. One of the things that you learn is that there was a crossover between Ireland and the Middle East. And if you don't believe me, go look it up. Because there were words, the Greeks in the Mediterranean, they had a word, it was Kelta, or Kelta. That word basically just meant like barbarian. It was like not us. That word eventually stuck with the Romans, and the Romans gave that name to the Celts as we know them now.
Well, doesn't that what barbarian mean anyway? Just like not us.
Basically, yeah, but that was their word for barbarian. Basically, was that. So when you look at the history of these people, and then you go back and you study all of these different cultures, they all have giants, and they all have red-haired giants. It's really weird. Now, even to the point where the Romans, they used Gaul or Transalpine Gaul in Spain, Hispaniola. They instituted a breeding program. Wherever the Romans went, now follow me, folks, they would always allow the bulk of their army, if they had the provisions and it wasn't, and they weren't in a big hurry, they would allow them to bring their families, because a soldier who has his family with him is less likely to get nervy and then decide that, you know what, I'm going to go AWOL.
Yeah, desert.
Because they've laid roots down, because colonization was the main goal of the Romans. So one of the things they did was they actually, in the Iberian Peninsula, they interbred with the Iberian Celts. And they did this because the Iberian Celts were taller, the Romans were shorter and squattier, and they were facing these, what to them would be giants. I mean, they were 6 foot tall. The Teutons and the Goths, they were Germanic tribes coming out of Trier, Austria, whatever. They were huge. They were giants. And to the Romans, they were giants. I mean, they were like, we're 5'4" on average. These people are 6 foot, 6'2". That's unheard of, Why were they so big? Why were they so tall? Why did the Teutons have red hair? The theory is that they were the descendants of giants, and the Romans were absolutely convinced that these were the descendants of giants. So they took the tall, lanky, horseback riding Iberian Celts, which would be modern day Spain. And Marcus Aurelius did something very intelligent. He said, dude, when you are stationed in Hispaniola or Iberia, you were not allowed to bring your family. Only you had to petition. 1 in 3 soldiers was allowed to bring their family. They were to take wives of the Iberian Celts amongst the conquered tribes. Same thing with the Gaelic, with the Gauls, which later became France. Reason being, we colonize it, we control it, blah, blah, blah. That was something that Julius Caesar had already done. He had left a bunch of his people there. Of course, you know this, Anthony. Alexander did the same thing. They interbred with the locals. That's why the Greek influence is all over the place. Now, when you look at the Sea People conquest, going back to that, back in, I think it was the 27th or the 24th, it doesn't matter. Anyway, Egypt, they were attacked by the Sea Peoples 3 different times, in particular one during I think the 24th dynasty. I could be wrong about that. They talk about them being inundated with giants. They got their butts kicked because these people, and it wasn't the whole bunch of them, but they did not look like people. They did not look like normal people. They supposedly came up out of the ocean, and they had giants with them. Now, there was a conquest in Ireland. The same thing happened. And in Ireland, they had what they called the Fomori. Anybody ever heard of that?
I haven't.
Fomori were giants, and guess where the giants come from? Take a guess. Were the Irish coastal towns that were destroyed by these creatures? Where do you think they came from?
Inner Earth.
Inner Earth. The Fomori came from 2 places, actually. Underneath the sea and the inner earth, which is the same thing. That's where they came from. So there are records of these giants coming to Ireland doing the same thing that they did, and that's why I believe that red hair is so prevalent amongst the Irish people say, yeah, it was spread by the Norse, but that doesn't totally make sense because the Norse they did a lot more conquering and a lot more colonizing in the north of Scotland and in England. So there would be a lot more prevalence of red hair, which there's not. It's more common amongst the Irish in particular in that region of Ireland. Then there's also a high prevalence of black hair and black eyes in Irish. They call them the Black Irish. One of the reasons, I believe, is not just because the Spanish Armada that was sunk there, and it wasn't the British. Once again, the British get credit for doing something they didn't do. They're like, they sunk the Spanish Armada. No, sorry to break it to you, crown lovers. No, they didn't. It was a storm that shipwrecked the Spanish Armada, and the British are like, yeah, we won the war. Yes, once again. Kind of like Dunkirk, where 45,000 French were killed.
About to mention Dunkirk.
Yeah, Dunkirk, where 45,000 French were killed, and then they get the bad rap of they just throw their guns down and gave up when 45,000 of them were killed, covering the British retreat. But we're not going to get into that. Not to offend my British patrons or whatever, but let's history's history. It's been slanted, okay? Let's just say it's been slanted. Irish, high prevalence of this. Colin Farrell. You look at Colin Farrell, in the right light, he looks Hispanic. He's Irish. Why do you think his hair is black and he's got eyes? They have genetic markers from the Mediterranean. And I know that a few hundred Spaniards being shipwrecked in the north of Ireland is not going to change the entire population to turn like thousands upon thousands of them into, of course they were stuck there. Those Spaniards were stuck that they never left. They never were able to go back to their homeland. The Irish were like, welcome to where it sucks. Here's a potato. And the Spanish were like, this is terrible. What do we do? Nothing. The English should blow you out of the water.
Suffer, lad.
Suffer, lad. Have fun. Okay, make the best of it. Here's my sister. She doesn't have a husband. There's about 30 more where that came from. The Spanish were like, oh, well, I guess this isn't so bad. We'll just hang out for a little while. Kind of what happened. But they have all the way down into the south of Ireland. Ireland proper, not Northern Ireland. It's two different countries. They have genetic markers of the Mediterranean bloodline. I think that Mauritania exchanged things with them. All the way down to the names even of these giants. When you look at the names that the Mauritanians had given these giants, the sea people, the Fomori, which actually is like those that come from the sea or underneath it, whatever. It's the same thing, like the names. They even had a god that they worshipped, Baal. Okay? The Mediterraneans, in particular, and Carthage was the stronghold until the Romans destroyed it. Carthage was built in honor to Baal. And then, of course, in Lebanon, there's Baalbek, which was a temple, and the entire complex city was built around that temple to a giant god named Baal. Now, the difference is that the Celtic Irish called it Baal. Baal. Baal, Baal.
Same thing.
Same thing. There is a connection there, folks. And if you think I'm joking, go look it up. Go do your own research, and you come back and tell me I'm a liar. Okay? These people had contacts. They had connections. And now, I do believe that Atlantis was a real place, and I believe it was built by giants. I really do. I believe that our ancestry, we are people with amnesia. Somebody said, no, we're not. We have... Somebody told me that the other day, and they gave me a big old long, and I just was like, TLDR, dude. Okay, I don't know about all this. All right, goodbye. You're more than welcome to type up an essay and send it to me, and I'm more than welcome to not read it. And somebody said, you're choosing to be ignorant. Yes, I am. And it sucks for you that I have a show that has 20,000 subscribers, and you don't. Okay? So you are more than welcome to go and build a show. And maybe 3 years from now, you can have 20,000, 21, whatever it is, that will listen to you. But the fact is, for now, while it makes some to jump for joy and others to gnash their teeth, I have a show, okay, and it tells you, I'm telling you right now, what I have read and what I have studied. even to the point where when this Dogman book is done, I may just skip the other one and do this, because I may just write a big old book about it. I don't know yet. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I want all this information to be downloaded from my brain into your brains, and then you can take it and you can go in whatever direction you want. Here's the thing. You had two, to me, what I consider false gods, but they were gods to them, Baal and Baal. Two different places, two totally similar names. Right? Totally different places, similar names. Almost the same. When you start to study this and when you start to go in depth and you start to find these truths, that's where these giants, these stories, that's where they came from. They existed. They were absolutely real. And we, to this day, are seeing the remnants of it. Now, I had a friend of mine who used to have a YouTube. He was always on YouTube or whatever. And he did not believe that any giants could have survived the flood. But if you go back and you learn, what I've learned is that, yes, they did. Okay? Because the flood didn't cover the entire earth, the entirety of the earth. There's a lot of translations in the Bible that have been misquoted, mistranslated. It says in the Quran, too, and I'm not saying it because I'm not Muslim, but it does say that it was not all over the entire earth. Now, read the book of Enoch. Go and find the codices, the books that were found in the Nag Hammadi Desert in the 1860s. That's what you need to read those. Okay? The Apocryphals. You'll find in the Gnostics, the Apocryphals, you'll find all this information. It's there. There's even a book of giants, but it's incomplete. We got some of it. And you will see that there is a precedence for these things. Now, in one of my travels, and I'm going to say this, and I don't want to sound crazy, but the show is already what it is, okay? I have left my body multiple occasions. I ran into what I thought was a malleable metal wall. And I began to touch this wall, and I felt it moving up and down, and I was like, whoa, that's weird. And I look up, and I see this being that looked like, I don't know how to describe it, like a Viking. He had blonde hair. Okay, you could see like hair, like braids. And he had a helmet with where the eyes were like that, and it had the nose piece, and it had the helmet. And he was just looking down at me very stern. He wasn't being threatening. He didn't even like chastise me for touching his breastplate, because that's what that wall was his breastplate. And I looked up at him, and I was terrified. I'm not going to lie. I was in absolute horror at that point, because then I realized what I was looking at. It was a giant. It was an actual being, and I don't know exactly. I can't say I was on the astral plane or if I was deeper, but I'm pretty sure somewhere within the earth, and this thing was there. And it looked like a Norse being or something. I don't know how to describe it other than that. I didn't see a weapon, because his chest and his body were taking up what would have been an entire wall. I would say, if you were going by where I was standing, he was probably, 12 to 15 feet. And he was just looking down at me very stern. And typically when I come across other beings, I can overpower them. I know it sounds weird to those of the uninitiated, but in your spirit form, you have a lot of energy, you have a lot of power. We are made of the life and breath and spark of God. And you can use that, But this being, I don't want to say he was an angel, because I don't know that, but it was like without any communication, I could see a stern look on his face, and basically him saying, to get the heck out of here. Just go away. Don't even think about it. You have no chance. Just leave. And that's what I did. And so whenever I encountered that being, I started thinking about it, and it's something that I thought about it for months, and I thought, what was it? Who was it? Where was it? Those are answers I don't have, folks. I do not know. Okay? But what I can tell you 100% is that I believe that it was a real thing, a real being. I was out of my body. It absolutely happened. It was a real situation that took place. Has it happened again? No. I have never encountered another being with that much power, anything like that, in any of my travels. Do I believe that it was I was out of my body? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm telling you the absolute truth. Is it possible that these kids, these young black kids in East St. Louis were throwing rocks and a giant came out of that railroad car? Absolutely. Is it possible that the giant of Kandahar was a real thing? Absolutely. Now, can I say, Josh Turner sitting here before you, 100% that that's where, I don't know. But is it possible? Yes, I personally believe that it is. I can tell you another thing, too. I've seen large creatures, entities, on multiple occasions. It wasn't just like that guy. Never saw like a Bigfoot, that I could say definitively that it was a Bigfoot. But me and my wife were talking about it the other day, and twice in my life, I believe I've had Bigfoot encounters. But I can't say with all certainty that it was a Bigfoot, because me and Lyle Blackburn talked about this. Lyle, who I was talking about earlier, go and check out his interview with Dark Waters. I think it's a great, they did a good job, those two. But it was, Lyle had told me that he saw something large, hairy, red-haired when he was looking in Fouke, Arkansas. And Anthony and Tony, you were in the vehicle with me when it happened, when he told me this. But he couldn't make it out definitively, and that's what happened to me. What I saw was brownish red moving through a pasture very quickly, and I couldn't. My wife got a really good look at it. She says it was a Bigfoot. No offense to her, more power to her, but me personally, I can't say that because I didn't see beyond. I didn't see the side view of it. I just saw the back side of something going down like that. Because there is just a slim chance that it could have been a cow falling down. I told her, I don't know. I don't think it was a cow falling down, but I didn't see a face. So I don't know what it was. I don't go around saying I saw something if I didn't see it dead on 100%. I don't know what it was. But is it a coincidence, though, that there is a red-haired... And I'm not saying that this isn't some sort of, maybe species of animal or whatever, but let's think about this. Why are these things giant? Why are they so big? Why do people see these hominin and hominid, two different things, one's ape-like and one's more of a man, Why do people see them with red hair? Why are they so tall? Why are they so large? I mean, it is a weird thing. Now, this show right here today is Halloween Leftovers. We're not here to talk about red-haired giants. This is just one story, but we're going deep into that story. But I will come back to this subject. You watch, and I'm going to come down, and I'm going to break it down. I'm going to tell you a little story straight out the box from the red-haired giant category. All right? I'm just kidding. I'm rapping over here, dude. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, folks, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come back to this, okay? But this is it. We're going to move on. Anybody want to comment on this before we go to the next story? Let me know. And if you guys over here across the table from me have anything to say, let me know before we move on to the next.
There was someone who left a comment that was pretty interesting. It's too far back to see who it was, but they said something along the lines of, typically, I guess according to doctors and surgeons, that red-haired people require more anesthesia to go under, and they also generally have a higher pain tolerance.
Yeah, and that's weird because I did a dive on that because you remember Cowboy Carl?
Yeah.
A friend of ours. Tell him who that is.
He's a professional boxer. He's, I think is he from Thorndale?
Yeah, and he's
really nice, humble guy. I didn't even know that he was a big-time professional boxer whenever I met him. He didn't say anything about it. I just thought he was just another country boy, because he doesn't act like he's anything special. He's just very...
a lot of the same people that I do.
But yeah, he's a red haired, like, ginger
Mm-hmm.
person too, and I mean he can take a punch.
Yeah, he can fight.
You got to have a high pain tolerance to make
Be-
it at that level.
Mhm.
But yeah, it just makes sense. He's playing to his strengths.
Pain medicine does not work on them the same way it does on other people. There are people too who have a fear. This is an actual thing. One of my friend's ex-girlfriends, she was terrified of red-haired people. I mean, absolutely terrified of them. That's an actual thing. There are people who are afraid. I used to know this guy. He was on my football team. He was a black guy. And he used to tell me all the time, he goes, red-haired people freak me out, dude. Like, he was freaked out by them. Like, he was scared of them, And we had a red-haired guy that was a good friend of ours. I played ball with him in Rockdale. And grew up with him, good guy. He was just a red-haired kid. But he was very hyper-aggressive. Like, he was a hyper-aggressive guy. And I'm not picking on red-haired people. What I'm saying is, let me look at Canelo. He's a great boxer.
Mm-hmm.
He's a red-haired guy. But that gene, though, whatever that gene is, it's a weird thing because genetically they have certain quirks that other people don't have. And then they also have, some of them can have a penchant for violence and are good at it. So it is a weird thing, and I do have a couple stories of people giving me stories of what seem to be Neanderthal type people. One of them out of northern Louisiana and another one out of Arkansas, the border, where these things looked like red-haired, not giants, because they're only about 7-8 feet tall, which it's not giant like you'd think of as a giant. It's big. It's Bigfoot proportions.
Still huge.
Yeah, and then you have Bigfoot, but these things did not look like Bigfoot. Now, when I had Lon Strickler on the show, me and him talked about it in depth, he gave a very vivid description of what he saw, and it was more of a throwback humanoid type being, So when you go back and you start taking these stories into account, and when I write this book that I'm going to write about Bigfoot, it's not going to be a conventional book. I'm going to go into some of these stories, and we're keeping some back because we have to have something to put in, we have to have something to load into the chamber, We don't rebuild here. We've said this before. Anthony knows this. We reload, okay? We're not going to ever have to start over and go, oh, we're out of stories. There's no way, because we just get so many. I want you to put the camera on Anthony, and I want you to test this, the emails we get of how many stories we get on a weekly basis.
Yeah, we can't even keep up with them.
We cannot keep up with them.
It's like every day there's at least 4 or 5 new emails coming in from people detailing their accounts of things just all across the paranormal spectrum. So.
Mm-hmm. And then Tony, of course, does his job by not reading them.
Oh no, I see them, and then I was like, oof, thank God, I can just forward those off someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So me and Nellie and Anthony have to start, and now Alec, you two, It's good, though, that we have Tony to just throw them our way. He goes, hey, guys, check the emails. See ya.
Let you guys know that things are piling up while you guys are slacking off.
And then he's like, I'm off to walk Banjo. He's gone. Banjo's laying there on the floor, and you're like,
Yeah.
I thought you were going to walk Banjo. Banjo's like, I did too. Apparently I'm owned by a liar.
But if you ever need someone to do a decent Shaquille O'Neal impression,
Oh,
Tony's
dude,
your guy.
he's spot on.
He can sell a lot of icy hot
He'd be
patches,
like,
let me tell you.
Let me tell you about the redhead giants. We'll come up with sea people. We were talking about Egypt. Maybe there's some kind of connection between them and Ireland. It's pretty crazy. That's Tony's rendition of what I just said in a nutshell. Because he paraphrases, then he doesn't go into all them crappy details, pesky details we don't need to hear about. So here's what we got. We got a story about the red-haired giants. There was one other thing I wanted to say about it, but I couldn't remember what the heck it was, so we're just going to move on. And I was going to make a joke, but I better not, because I will never get picked to win anything if I do that. And I don't care. Honestly, I really don't give a crap. I'm never going to get picked to win anything anyway. Here we go. So this one was a werewolf story. At the request of this individual who wants to make my life hard, I'm just kidding. He's not a bad guy. He had something happen when he was living here. He moved to Arizona, started over, did security out there for a while, and now he's a police officer. So we're changing the location of this story just to. So this is in San Diego. He's living in San Diego at the time, and he had an encounter. Or let's put it this way: he lives in San Diego, I guess now. He was a security guard in Arizona, and he had answered a call on a broken down car that was there. They said, "Hey, this car's been here for it was in a shopping center. It had been here for a couple days." And so he asked one of the other guards about it, and the guard that was on the opposite day of him said, "Yeah, that car's been there, but I have seen a person getting in and out of it and leaving and then coming back. I think maybe it's a homeless person who's hanging out in that car." He said, "Overnight, I haven't seen the person, but I saw them at the beginning of my shift, which was in the daytime. And so on the weekends, they have a 24/7 guard. But during the week, they just have a guy that goes through, does a drive-through." That's how that account was. Little unorthodox, but clients, Tony, you know this, they ask weird things. I mean, they'll tell us, "We want you to do 4 hours now, and then 12 hours later, and then stand on your head and do the."
We want you to water this plant, but only on Tuesdays when the crack of the moon is flying through the sky after being chased by Fenrir.
Only when the three planets align, So they asked for weird stuff. So he said, okay, so he was there. One of the people in one of the stores said that person was definitely sleeping in their car, so they called it in that night. He went out there to go check, and so when he went to go check, this vehicle was definitely unoccupied. So he called his boss, and he said, "Hey, this has been going on for a couple of weeks. I talked to the opposite guard, and then the guard on the weekend said the person's coming and going, but they're leaving it here at night." So he said, "Well, put a sticker on it." So they give them this sticker basically to put on the car. Tony, you know about that. Mm-hmm. And then they will they can tow it. They got a certain amount of time, whatever. So he does that. The allotted time passes. He comes back. It's like it's been 9-10 days, whatever. The vehicle has not moved. Okay, it just sits there. And then it begins to become dirty or whatever because it's just sitting there. And now at this point, it's become an abandoned vehicle. Once the time was up, he was getting ready to call it in. So he was looking at the date, and he said, "Oh, it's about a day before we got to whatever." So he drives up to it just to make sure there's nobody in there. And what he sees shocks him. He sees what looks like a dog or a cat. He wasn't still real sure about it at the beginning of this. He said it was like a dog or a cat. And it was like laying there on the seat, and the seat was down. And he thought, "Oh, this person must have left their animal in this car that was about to be towed." And he said it only had about 8 hours, and it was ready to tow that thing away. So there was something wrong with this animal. It did not look like a normal dog or a cat. And he said that it was like just kind of sitting there, kind of undulating, kind of going up and down. But eventually it began to, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but he told me, he says, "This sounds crazy." I said, "Dude, I do this. I hear this stuff all the time." That it began to become larger. He goes, it was like it was expanding or something. It was growing like it was. And then he goes, "I thought maybe it was the animal was dead, and it was getting ready to whatever." And so he goes, "Maybe I'm just witnessing. Maybe I'm losing my mind. I don't know what's going on here, but there is something not correct about this situation." So he goes back to his truck. He calls it in, and he tells the dispatch. He says, "I'm dealing with something. Maybe you should get the police over here. I think there's some sort of animal." Right then, on the back of the window, this head of this animal that he sees pops up into the back window. and it's like snapping and biting at the back window. Then he sees like a hand-like claw start to scratch at the back window, and then another one, and then he said it's like, and it's tearing up the back of the car. And he said this was a big, because like an Oldsmobile or whatever, and it was tearing up the seating, everything, and then it began to bite into the seating, and he thought he still could not tell by the facial features of this animal, whether it was cat-like, a black cat-like, or a wolf-like. He said, but he began to lean more toward wolf-like, and then at one point it began to notice him. He was kind of off to the side of the car and behind it, and it just began to stare in his direction, and he goes, it was awful. He said, once this thing began to stare at me, once I caught its attention, he goes, I thought, oh my gosh, this thing is it's staring right at me. And he goes, and it didn't break its gaze. He goes, it just stared at me. He goes, and it had almost like self-illuminated yellow eyes. Now, sometimes you get stories and they'll tell you that they have yellow eyes, but it's you got to ask, are they self-illuminated, or are they being lit up by the lights? And he said his truck was back behind, and off to the side, so it wasn't directly on that. He said he had his flashlight on. He took his flashlight off, and the eyes had it was like they had absorbed, like glow in the dark. Mm-hmm. My words, not his. But I said, so is it like glow in the dark? He goes, kind of, yeah. It's like it absorbed the light, and his eyes were just like, and he said they were just bugged out. And I said, so what? It's and I wasn't trying to be rude, but I said, we'll call him D. I said, D, it sounds like you're describing a werewolf on crack. I mean, and I wasn't trying to be funny.
He's tweaking.
Yeah, it was a tweaker dog man, and he goes, yeah, it kind of was. He didn't. This guy, he's in law enforcement now. I mean, he's not, but he wasn't making any bones about it. And he had an incident here. Not like that, but it was something similar. He had told me he had some stuff happen or whatever. And he said, dude, why? He's like, at that point, I thought, why me? He had a ghost encounter here where he was staying, and so that's why he left. Then he has this happen, and he told me, he goes, dude, I don't know. But he said this thing began to smack and pound all of the windows like it was trying to get out. And he was like, there was no way in hell that I was going to walk up to that car and look back inside to see what the heck it was doing. And he said, so I sat there waiting for the police. Well, he finally gets a message back from his dispatch, and they said, this is a call for animal control. Police are not going to show up in Phoenix, Arizona to come and extract this animal. They just have more things to deal with than dealing with a dog in the middle of, whatever in the city. And it was nighttime and it wasn't hot. So there was no fear of this animal being killed by the heat. So he begins to, at first he says, my first reaction was to try to tell the dispatch, it was a female. He said, I tried to tell her, you don't know what I'm dealing with. You need to see this to believe it. And he said, I wanted to get up and take a picture, get close enough to take a picture. He goes, but I didn't want to get close to it. Because he goes, the doors were like they were going to open at any minute. And eventually, he said, I thought this thing's going to break through one of these windows. Or, the windshields,
He's going to get out.
He's going to get out. And he's like, you have no idea. And she was like, I want to see. And he goes, well, you're more than welcome to come down here. And he, this is the address or whatever. And she was a dispatch, but she wasn't like stuck in a spot. You know what I mean? She was a patrol dispatch, so she could actually go to the area. She says, well, I'm about 5 miles away. Okay. And Phoenix is a big city. Anthony, we went through there a couple years ago. It's a big city. Very spread out, large place. And he said, I'm going to head that way. I'm about 5 miles out. And he says, well, I don't know if I'm going to be here when you get here. And no offense, but she's a very petite woman. And he said, but you might need to bring some backup. He's like, a pistol, mace, whatever is not going to work on whatever the heck this thing is. He said right as he got off of the radio, this thing managed to break through that back window and was coming through the back window, was halfway out. At this point, he saw what were definitely arms, not legs, stretched out over the back of the hood of the car. And it was pulling itself through the glass, pulling itself. And he said it was cut and bleeding. And it was like snapping, like it was like a rabid animal. And he said the best way he could describe it was like if you took a werewolf and it had rabies. He's like, I'm not joking. He goes, I swear it was like a werewolf with rabies. And I'm sitting there going like, now we've heard stuff like this before. I mean, this isn't like unheard of. We had the story in Michigan that I covered on DER where a kid had gone and this thing tried to get into the car and it got stuck trying to get into the car because sometimes these creatures do this. And people will tell me, well, it's a dog man, it's a werewolf, it's a skinwalker, it's whatever. It's
stuck and dangerous.
There's no way to know what these things really are, okay? It just was a being that was wolf-like, and it was, and like he said at first, he wasn't even sure if it was cat-like or wolf-like, and he said that the face was almost like a mixture of feline and canine, but he came to the conclusion that it did absolutely look like a werewolf. And he said that once it got its head out of the back window, the ears kind of popped up more, and they were straight up, pointy, and he could see from the side when it turned its head because the back window was dirty. Once it was gone, he said, I could see it clearly. Its head was huge, and it had this big snout. And he said that it was trying to get out. And he goes, at that point, I just pulled out of there. Well, the female dispatch, she showed up because she was curious, whatever. Have not talked to her, so I can't verify this part of the story. But from what she told him, when she arrived on scene, she pulled up. About 2 minutes after her was another patrol officer. It was a male, very large guy, who was moonlighting. He was actually worked in law enforcement. But what's going on? So what ended up happening was this thing was gone. It was not in the car anymore. So when they took their flashlights and they looked around, they saw that there was no creature, no nothing, and that this thing had decided that, they had decided there was nothing there, nothing to see. It, to them, was just an abandoned vehicle where something had broken out of it. That's all it was. So when they're getting in their vehicles and they're starting to drive off, the male who was there to back up the dispatch, he took off. The female, as she was turning her truck, sees this thing sitting, squatted down, very large, black hair, just completely black. It was very dark, and it almost blended in with the shadows, sitting up against the wall at the edge of one of the stores that was there in the parking lot. And she said this was an older parking lot. There was a little more rundown shopping center or whatever, not in a good area. And she said, I'm really curious at this point. She told him. So she decided to do something that probably wasn't the smartest choice. And she drove towards it. She said once the lights hit it dead on, she said it just sat there. It didn't put up an arm like we've heard Bigfoot and Dogman try to shield. And she said the eyes just sat there wide open and like they were absorbing the light. And then she saw it and she freaked out and she veered off. And she looked back and she said this thing was in pursuit of her truck. And when she looked back in the mirror of it, the eyes were definitely a self-illuminating, like a yellow glow. And according to what she told him, was yellow. The same thing he said, it was just a yellow glow, and it was running behind her vehicle, but she outpaced it pretty easily. But then she hit a curb, and then she pulled into oncoming traffic and had to bust a U and get out, And she said that it was right behind her, and she said that there had to have been at least 2 or 3 other people behind her and that saw it because it was standing right there by the road, and then it took off, Here's what happened, though. Now, there were cameras. There were cameras, absolutely there were cameras, and they actually recorded something. Now, there was a liquor store there where it was posted up by when it ran. And when they went back and they talked to the different shop owners, there were two of them in particular, the guy at the liquor store allowed them to look at the camera. And what they saw was shocking. It came up out of the vehicle, but it looked like a man coming out of the vehicle and falling down into the ground and running around on all fours like a naked dude.
Yeah.
But then something really weird happened. His image went completely blurry, and when he would move, it would just be like a black blur. Like he went like whoo, 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 from spot to spot. And they thought it was something wrong with the camera. And then he was off of camera range when he was in pursuit of her, because there was like a little road between separating that and another shopping center that he followed her out of with a hedge of bushes or something. At that time, because this was years ago, but still, this thing followed her to the road. So I asked him, I said, do you think it's possible that maybe this thing looked like a werewolf to you guys, but not to humans, not to other humans, not to other people?
Right.
Now, here's a weird thing. My cousin Donnie has this weird image that he got of a man. I don't know what it was. He said he's put it on his Facebook, okay, and it's one of his game cams, his trail cams, caught the image of a man nude. I think he's nude. I can't. The bottom part is weird. Like when it gets down toward the legs, in particular, the right leg starts to fade away. And it looks like it comes down, and the legs look like they're backward bent. Let me just show you. Okay. I'm going to show Anthony and Tony. I don't think you guys have seen this. I just saw it earlier. I didn't get a chance to show you guys. And I asked him, I said, what is going on with the leg on there? It's just it's a weird picture. And I don't know. I'm going to ask him if I can get permission to put it in the Paranormal Roundtable group, so that you guys can make up your own mind, because it is a weird freaking picture, dude. I don't know what to make of it. There it is right there. You and Tony take a look at that picture. Take a look at his right leg. Take a look at his buttocks. I mean, like, I can't tell whether he's wearing something. Look at how his bottom of his legs sort of fade away. Mm-hmm. Look at his bottom, what should be his right leg. What the hell is that?
Yeah, it looks weird.
It is so weird. The upper body is like a man.
You said his trail cam just caught this?
His trail cam caught that, yeah. So, and folks, I don't know how to show you this picture. I will ask him if I have permission. Do you see how the bottom part looks goat-like? Kind of like, I don't know. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then one of his legs looks like a dude morphing into something. And he said that it freaked him out. He wasn't even going to go back over there again. He's like, I'm good. I'm not going back over there to that part of the pasture. He's really freaked out. Yeah, I don't know what that was. But we have gotten weird stuff before. I mean, like one time I was driving between Leander, I've said this before on the show, and Georgetown, and I would say I was a good 10 miles from any human habitation, and a very large naked man jumped a fence, a barbed wire fence, ran across my road, not directly in front of my truck. He was probably a good 40, 50 yards ahead of me, but I saw clearly what it was. And then he jumped another fence, like really high up, and then just kept going. And I heard from a guy in Tennessee that happened, that this is a weird story I got near Knoxville. And I'll throw this one in there. It's not a real long one, but I did do a dive on this and in this area. And I wanted to talk to the Hendersons and to Barton about it because it's more their neck of the woods, and maybe they could give me some insight into it. Barton, yeah, well, and Barton, if you're listening, I don't know if you've ever heard anything like this. But one of the things that really freaked me out was that this man. I say the word man loosely. Have you ever heard of Plastic Man from the comic books?
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's
I don't know what
like
that is.
Plastic Man. He's like really long, elongated
You know
limbs, kind of like
Fantastic Four?
on the
Yeah.
Fantastic Four.
It's
Hey, what
Reed
is the guy?
Richard.
What is the guy's name that can move his arms? really
Mr.
long?
Fantastic.
Mr. Incredible.
No,
Mr.
it's
is it-
Mr.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Okay. But I, that's all I could think of when he said that, and I couldn't remember the name of the character. But he said that this guy came running across the road in front of him. He was driving his truck home from. He was playing cards. He was at a poker game, and he said he had a couple drinks. But he goes, "I wasn't drunk. I was not a crook," he said. Okay, so this thing goes running across the road, and he said that it was in 2 leaps on all fours, and he thought that is a naked guy with extremely elongated limbs and a weird-looking jaw that was hanging down, almost like a moon. Okay, and he said it was like this. That chin was almost like a Jay Leno special. And it just ran across the road, and he goes, "Whoa, that's crazy." Well, he had said that one of his nieces there was a spot there where they would go and that they would drink and hang out. It was kind of a lover's lane area, whatever. And that they had encountered 3 of these creatures. I say creatures, I don't know what they were. They were humanoids. They were people, white males, completely without clothing, about 7 foot tall, that were just running around on all fours with elongated limbs, and it looked like their arms and legs were growing longer. What is it?
Well, it's a creature from this movie called Legion.
Let me see.
It kind of looks kind of like what you're talking about.
Kinda, but it's
Run.
green. I don't know what that is.
Well, I mean, yeah, this one is just something that someone made up, but it's like elongated limbs with like an open mouth, and the legs just keep going longer.
Yeah. Yeah, and these things, they said there were 3 of them, and they were like hopping around on all fours. And at one point, one of them stood up and was kind of shaking and shimmering itself back and forth. And she said these things were approaching 7 foot tall. And they had really long, skinny bodies, elongated necks, very, very unnatural looking. I mean, like just, and they were terrified, and they were running around their vehicle. And there was another vehicle there, too, with a couple other kids, and they were scared to death. And so they all just took off. When I looked into that, though, there were a couple different spots that this is in that area that this has happened. To me, where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, there's got to be something going on that these people would give you these stories and then these pictures of these weird, I don't know what you want to call them. Do me a favor, though. Message Donnie on there. On just, you can text him. It's probably asleep right now. But no, it's almost 10 o'clock. He's probably still awake. Text him and ask him if I have permission to use that picture. I don't want to use it on the show because I can't tell, but it looks like it could be the man's buttocks showing.
It could be.
So I don't want to
hard to
show it
say.
on the show. But I'm going to see if I can post it on my Facebook page or whatever, and you guys can go and look at this trail cam pic. It is weird. Very weird, to say the least. But back to what I was saying. It's weird because you'll get these stories, and I got one out of Maine that was right near Augusta, which is the capital. And I was talking about it with my wife. And there was a story that we got, and I'm trying to remember. We hadn't processed it yet. Now, when I say process, me and my team here, we will go over a story, and we'll kind of process it and get more detail, and we will, whatever, blah, 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 and then turn it out to you guys. So this is an unprocessed story, but from what I was told, there was a ghost, I guess you want to call it. For lack of a better term, it was a ghost. Thank you for that donation, Felix Garnett. You have no idea how much we could use it right now. This move is going to cost us a grip. So we are definitely in hoping that we can keep doing the shows this month. We may have to put it on hold for just a little bit. We don't know. But because I really do like talking about this stuff. It is very fascinating to me. But there was this this is like I said, an dissected, or what do you call it, unprocessed story. Okay, this story has not been put through the ringer by anybody. This was just given to us, and I just was looking at the email, and I went over it with my wife, and that was it. I hadn't even gone over it with the guys over here. But it was what it was a on camera. There is a ghost, I guess, if you want to call it that. And as this thing moves around, it begins to like fade away on camera, but they can still see it like clearly. They see this thing inside their house. And there's like it's on camera, but it kind of just dissolves on camera, but it's still visible to them, which was kind of the opposite of what happened to me when I was at Palo Santos. Now, those cameras were being used by that particular place where I was working. It was a very rough place. They're not our client anymore, so I don't care. I'll tell you the name. It's called Palo Santos. It's not there anymore. It's called something else. Off of Runberg here in Austin. Those cameras picked up something that was on the camera, but you could not. You could see it with your naked eye. You could see it on camera, but not with your naked eye. It was like the opposite of what this was. This was, you could see it, but the cameras weren't picking it up. It was becoming a blur, and then it would reappear, and then it would kind of dissolve. But there's more to that story. I'm going to do a more investigating because it's a big, long story. But that part stuck out to me. So later on, if I tell that story and it sounds a little different, it's because, and I'm giving you the 411 on this, we have to actually process these stories. This is an uncut story. Like we haven't figured, we haven't gone through and cleaned it up and got all the details. All it is just a raw email. Raw. That's how you would call it, raw. So anyway, that's what's going on. But, you give me your thoughts. Tell me what you guys think in the chat here. Thank you, Vault. I haven't heard or seen you in a long time. What's going on with you, buddy?
Is that the right Donnie?
Did he just send that right now?
No.
Oh,
This is
okay.
an old text message.
What does it say? Is it yeah.
It's just under Donnie the Omen on
Yeah,
your phone.
he's my cousin. Just text him and say, hey, do I have permission to use this trail cam photo? And so... And I want to thank Brian Bowden for the nice shout out he did with wearing the Paranormal Roundtable shirt. That was cool. He was talking about my show being a good show. And Barton says Stretch Armstrong is an inhumanoid. Stretch Armstrong is a weird toy. And we had those when we were kids. Y'all have no idea what these are. They are basically like these stretchy with
I know
this
what they are,
weird
but they're
know what they
before my
are.
time.
goo inside of them. Stretch Armstrong, they were a little bit before my time too. They were like a mid to late 70s toy. They still had them around when I was little, and I could play with them, but most of the people who had them were older than me, and I was little, and I had a penchant for chewing and biting things. So not like a wild man, but I would chew on things a lot, toys. Years ago, I went back and I looked at my little Star Wars figures that I still had left, and some of the guns were just chewed and elongated out like I just chewed them up. I don't know what I was doing. I was always chewing on stuff. But this Stretch Armstrong had this weird goo inside of it that was kind of hard, but it was malleable. And the bad guy was a reptilian dude. He was like green. He was like some sort of like creature, like reptilian like thing. It's kind of funny that Barton said that because it reminds me like when Dark Waters was talking to Lyle, because I actually don't get to watch many interviews. I don't have a lot of time, but I watched that one this morning, late last night, early in the morning, and Dark Waters was talking about reptilians, and one being the alligator-headed looking creature, kind of like the one that the guy in Cairo, that Nelly told that story on the show years ago. Mm-hmm. And the guy was changing into it, and then when his cloth, when it had his wrapped around his face, was coming down, and his snout, it was growing, and he jumps out of the cab. Remember that story? Mm-hmm. And then he jumped into the Nile. He was turning into a crocodile, like in this guy's cab. And so that was a crazy story. Nelly fielded that report and told that story. what was so crazy about that was that Dark Waters was talking about there's two different types of reptilians that not just two, but the two that he's gotten stories about, and one of them is this creature that looks like V. Now, if anybody knows what V is, go back. It stands for visitors. It was a mini series that became a series on a television, network television. I can't tell you which one of those stations it was on, but it had this weird, like, you'd rip the flesh off and there would be this reptilian green face underneath it. And that creature that looks kind of like that is one that's known to be way more violent and aggressive than this upright crocodilian looking creature. The upright crocodilian creature sounds like Sobek. Now, if anybody knows what that is, it's an Egyptian deity and god, whatever, named Sobek. And Sobek is a reptilian god, but he's got the head of a crocodile.
Yeah.
But he's also known to be very demonic. And so there have been stories and reports of people being possessed by the spirit of Sobek and committing cannibalism. There was even a small sect or cult in Egypt, in Alexandria, and in Cairo, where they were murdering people and sacrificing them to the crocodiles. Jeez. And they were doing it in honor of the god Sobek. And they were selling drugs, and that was how they were getting their protection, kind of like how some people pray to Santa Muerta.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of weird stuff going on there. But anyway, we're going to get off track here. The point is that that's weird that Barton acknowledged Stretch Armstrong, and there is a green one that was the bad guy. And I believe that even V had some toys that came out, and I think it was Kenner that made them. I'm not 100% on that. But anyways, back to the stories. The werewolf, weird thing, weird story. Along that same vein, I'll tell this one too while we're in the same, whatever. Just because it's this happened in Tucson, and it's Arizona, same thing. But there was this weird story I got, and this guy claimed that he was working security, and there was a pizza place there that he said this was back in like the late 90s, whatever. And he was walking the guy out to the trash can, and they threw a trash can in there. And I kid you not, this is what he told me. It's not a really long story, but it is pretty shocking, and it's creepy. But this guy pops up out of the trash can. Now, here in Austin, you're going, oh, yeah, that was a homeless guy. Because you throw trash away, you're probably going to hit a homeless person because we have what they call lurpers. What is a lurper, Anthony? Give me water.
I don't remember.
I don't know what a lurper is.
What is just a homeless person digging through the trash?
Yeah. You don't remember Uncle Jaime telling us about that?
I don't think so.
Okay. Anyway, he was talking about the guy that burned the camp down over there. He was a lurper. Thank you. So a lurper is somebody here in Austin, what we call them, that they not LARP. They call them lurpers. And then they dig in the trash, and we have one over here at one of our sites. But the thing about him, he would be benign if he didn't throw it all over the place and then leave the mess there and to get us into trouble. So what ended up happening was this. I probably could see this better. Put my glasses on. Put my glasses on so I could see the comments a little better. Oh yeah, there you go. So what ended up happening with this guy is they throw the trash. The guy throws the trash, and they're both talking, and they're turning to walk back, and they hear, and they turn around, and I kid you not, this is what I was told. I got a statement from the one guy and I actually talked to the other dude. Okay, and this guy told me what they saw was what looked like a man who's the I think he said it was the right side of his face was beginning to morph, and it was turning and kind of going off to the side, and the guy literally pushed his face back in place from his elongated chin, and his face began to slope downward, and the eyes were setting back. And I said, dude, what you're describing to me is a literal werewolf transformation. And he said, yeah, it looked very painful, and it was happening very quickly. It wasn't like in the movies where they're like, oh.
Yeah, it was just long drawn
you know,
out
and they're going,
thing.
okay, I'm not going to do all it, you know, and then it's like one finger, you know, and they're just like, there's just all this weird bubbling and weird whatever crap. That's not what was happening. He said it was like really quickly happening, and this dude was kind of helping it along. And he said that it was what they at first thought was a homeless guy was literally becoming a werewolf before their eyes, and they ran inside the pizza place. And they told the manager, and the manager came out, and he's like, whoa, what is this guy in my back of my trash can? I'm going to bust him up. I'm going to go out there and do some stuff to this guy. No, I'm just kidding.
How dare he?
He did not talk like that. His name was not Gino. No, he was just like, what? So he opens the door, and there's nothing there. This guy is so in disbelief of what these two guys are saying, he decides he's just going to walk right out to the trash can. He goes, he looks, and he's like, nothing in there. He turns around, and right there from like a little clump of bushes, they could see this thing hiding, ducking down. And the guy turns around, and the thing is ducked down completely, and he doesn't see it. He turns back around and goes, what is it with you guys, man? This is crazy. You're telling me this crazy story. And that security guard says, I quit. He's like, I was like, I'm done. I quit. He got in his car, went to the front, and he just drove out. And then he said, if I was driving out, the kid that had taken the trash out was walking out, and he quit too. Then he says, about a week later, he goes in to get his check. And he said that the manager says, hey, I want to talk to you. He says, do you remember, a report that you turned in about a homeless guy that began to, for lack of a better term, tear his face off? And he says, yeah, I remember in front of the pizza place. And he says, okay. He said, well, I got a call from the owner. He says, the owner wants us to come back to work. He says, nope, hell no, I'm not going to do it. And he goes, well, I'm not asking you to do it, but do you think, is it unsafe? Should I send someone over there? And he says, well, first of all, you're kind of laughing about it. He goes, the manager and this other guy they were laughing, kind of, oh, shit, it's safe? Is it a werewolf? And he says, it's not safe. He says, what I think I saw was a person that was digging in the trash and became a werewolf, or he was hiding in the trash. And the manager of the company, the security companies, was like, you're being serious. He says, yeah, I turned the report in. Did you not read it? And he says, well, honestly, I read part of it. I just thought it was, I didn't read that he turned into something. He says, I watched this guy's face turning into what looked like a werewolf. And he said, and he was telling me, because at one point when we were having our conversation, and I don't know if any of you guys might have heard it, but I kind of scoffed. I didn't scoff. I just kind of went, huh. And he was very quick to go, and if you're going to laugh at me, I'm going to hang up. I said, I'm not laughing. Nobody's laughing. Okay? I told him if I was laughing, I go, and that's how I laugh. It's very, whatever. And then I would have been like, fair enough. But I don't do that. I'm not, it's not what I'm talking about. I don't laugh like that. And I don't make jokes about this kind of stuff because I know that a lot of people have seen these things and people are terrified to come forward because they will be laughed at. And the dogman community, in its own ignorance and its own arrogance, scoffs at these things. Folks, first and foremost, we have to even come to the realization that these things are real. They're absolutely real. But then you have somebody who tells you something that deviates from what you want it to be. Then you're like, oh, that's bullcrap, and that makes us look crazy. No, little brain. Us believing in it and talking about it makes us look crazy already, if you haven't noticed, okay? So talking about this thing transforming isn't going to make you look even more crazy. It just is what it is. Because I got people asking me all the time, especially from the Bigfoot perspective, going, how does that work? How is a wolf-like thing standing up on its hind legs that's been around for 1,000,000 years, 1,000 years, whatever? Where is this at in the fossil record, and how does this work? Because that doesn't make any sense to me at all. And so you got people who absolutely will not accept the possibility of what these things are. They want to believe that there's some sort of breeding population and that they're that way all the time. And that sounds good on paper, but show me some proof. Because I do get stories about these things transforming because I'm one of the few people who's willing to put it out there. I've heard a million of these stories that have been doctored to leave that part out. In fact, this guy right here that came to me had gone to another person who did not want that story being told on his show because it was crazy. And I asked this guy, had he ever had anything else happen to him? He said one time when he was a kid, he thought he saw a UFO with his mother. And they were in New Mexico. Other than that, there wasn't anything else. There was a security guard. And that was years ago. He lost touch with the guys that worked there. He goes, I don't work there anymore. I don't live there anymore. He's like, but that's what happened. Happened in Arizona. And he didn't see the finished product. He didn't stick around to see this thing jump out of the trash can and run around.
Yeah, that was a smart decision.
Yeah. When he looked out the door and the goofy owner was out there walking around, okay, who didn't believe him, he saw something hiding behind some large bushes, and that was it. He just went back inside, and he's like, I quit. I'm not going to work this site. If the company wants to fire me, fire me. I'm done. But they were being terrorized by a homeless person who may or may not have been a werewolf. That's what this individual told me, and I'm not going to sit here and argue and debate it, okay? You believe what you want to believe. Somebody says here, what is the difference between the dog man and the werewolf? Nothing. Folks, I'm not going to be the amazing Randy over here, okay? But I'll give you $1 million if you can come to me and show me the difference between a werewolf and a dog man. If you can prove to me that there's a difference, I'll give you the shirt off my back and every shirt I own, okay? Whatever you want. You can come and take all the equipment in mine if you could prove to me that there is some sort, because there is no way that you can ever prove one way or the other. I mean, we cannot say that these people are wrong or that they're crazy. Corley, thank you for that donation. Lunar, thank you for that donation. Vault, thank you for that donation. What do you guys think?
Well, it's like every square is a rectangle, but not every rectangle is a square or something like that. It's kind of a similar thing where
every rectangle is a square, but not every square is a rectangle.
I mean, I had to probably switch. But I mean, it's probably the same thing where it's like every situation that has to deal with this creature might fall into a category, but that doesn't mean that each category of what the overall situation is might blend together. Like they might not be carbon cutoffs of each encounter. Like there might be some differences, but I think they're all pretty much the same thing. I mean, to put divisions in them, you're just making it even more complicated on a subject that we don't even understand. So, I mean, I think just keep it simpler, you know?
Yeah, there's no point in trying to make this topic sound like normal or mainstream or even palatable at all, because it's just not. There's nothing normal about it. There's nothing mainstream about it, and to the average person, no matter how you slice it, it's not going to be palatable. So you might as well just take people's encounters and share them as they shared them with you, to the extent that you have their permission. And these are like some genuine, like physical shapeshifter encounters. It's a classic werewolf. It's not like people saying that they just saw these dogman creatures and that's all they saw. No, they witnessed the physical transformation taking place, and I think that physical transformation that is something completely unnatural. And in order to acquire like these unnatural abilities, the only way to do it really, in my opinion, is through like ritual, demonic sacrifices, whatever. Like there's something you have to do. There's something very. It's a dark thing. Put it that way. Long story short.
Yeah, dark magic slash black science.
Yeah, the flesh is not supposed to transform.
No,
like that.
at all.
Oh dang! I thought I was supposed to be able to transform and stuff. Now you're letting me down and stuff. Thanks for letting me know, Anthony.
Corley Canner asks a good
typical.
question. Do you think skinwalkers and werewolves are the same thing? What do you guys think?
No, I think they're two different things.
I think two different things, but in the same category. Where like, if it's one thing imitating the other, or one thing that's just transforming to, look like this other creature, or if it's imitating a different creature and that's the end product. Either way, the end result is this bipedal wolf-looking creature. So then once you start devising and like mixing it up and
Yeah.
putting them into boxes, and then you're never going to be able to figure out what's going on. So
Well, okay, let me ask you guys a question. And Alec, you might have even been in the vehicle. The other night, we were driving down Duval. And remember, we saw that weird guy with his arms down. It looked like he had his arms down past his knees. And he had long dreads, but he was so weird looking. We couldn't tell. I know it was probably a male, but I couldn't tell what race or anything else. And remember, me and Nelly were like, "Oh, what is that?" And the guy was just, you remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. I get so many stories of people, and we talked about this, Anthony, Tony. We were all in the car. I think we were coming back from pinballs or whatever. But we talked about this. We talked about doing a show just based on the stories that we get of what people encounter walking down the sidewalk at night.
mhm.
Because right there at that particular apartment complex, I don't know, we should say the name of it. I mean, it's probably not important. But anyway, I remember when we were doing security there. And I remember one time, my brother Diablo was walking. It was. Cause you remember how you were talking about how ridiculous it was. Remember they had us do 4 hours here and 4 hours. They were jumping around.
Oh yeah, I hated that place.
It was terrible. And so he was doing the 4 hours on the night side, and I believe it was like right around Halloween, and they had some vandalism going on. And he said that when he told the one guy, there was a guy near a vehicle by those garages they had, and that was the garages were the only place where they weren't getting broken into. But then he saw somebody like prying it open or whatever, and he said when he turned and he looked, and the guy looked weird, and his arms were like really, really overly long. And then the guy just got down and kind of like squatted and then ran really fast on his two legs, but squatted down, running quickly. And I thought, that is so weird when you think about that. I had an encounter with somebody one time when I was working at a place called Travis House. It's no longer there. Who I told my wife the other day may or may not have been a vampire. I don't know. I have a really weird story that I've never told. Partially because it sounds weird, and I was the only witness to it. And typically, I don't want to tell any stories about what happens to me unless I can have somebody to vouch for it. Like I told you guys earlier that I saw that what I think was a giant. And people at home could be like, "Oh yeah, right. You're just saying that." So, and I've never really told this story, and then again, I don't know that this was a vampire. I don't know what it was. I don't know who he was or what he was. Someday I will tell that story. And if something ever happens to me, my boys here and my wife, they know the story and they can tell you. And my brother and Scorpion know the story and they can tell you. But at some point I'm going to tell that story. And I thought about maybe leaving it out until I write a book about vampires. I kind of like to do like Ron Murphy and just, write a book about all these different types of, a book about this, a book about that, because he's got all this on this subject series of books, very well written. Ron Murphy, very, very underrated guy. Ron Murphy, to me, is one of the hardest working men in this field. He's very, very underrated, and he's super intelligent. I don't like the way he talks. He talks like this. But if you go and he's written a book about vampires, he's written about werewolves, he's written about all this different stuff. And we've had long conversations, me and him. But one of the things that I remember about that guy was he had really, really long arms. And I'm talking like unnaturally long arms. And and tonight, like I said, it's not the time for the show. I tell you what, if we do a show next Tuesday, which I don't know if we're going to be moving or what we're going to do, but we'll try to get the show done next week. If enough of you guys message me and tell me, hey, I want to hear that story, I'll tell you what I think may or may not have been a vampire. I can't say he really did anything vampire to make me think, 100% it was a vampire, but it was a very weird encounter. Happened back in 2003. But he was a weird guy. Just like I think I may have ran into a skinwalker, because I think these things are attracted to certain energy, and I think that's why certain people see these things and other people don't, or that your perception is up enough that you know that it's there. It's real. Yeah, I don't know what to make of these stories when it comes to the shapeshifter ones. I probably got another half a dozen of them. I could do a whole show just on shapeshifting.
I mean, we've done them before.
Yeah, and not just werewolves though, but into these like reptilian type creatures. Somebody asked me this question, and it was a very good question. She's like, "How come nobody's ever seen anybody shapeshift into a Bigfoot?" And I said, "They have. People have seen these things shapeshift into Gugwe type creatures." There's a dumbass that goes around pretending to be the be all end all of the Gugwe. He used to be a friend of mine, but he's doesn't know what he's talking about. But he can get up there and BS, whatever. But yeah, the Gugwe is basically, to me, it has nothing to do with whether the Native Americans call it that or they don't call it that. He says it's the Native American, whatever, blah, 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 yeah, whatever. What I believe, all I know is the stories that people give me that fit the description of something that looks like it's a cross between a bear, a wolf, and a like a Neanderthal or Bigfoot. That's the only way I can describe a Gugwe. So when somebody talks to me about a Gug, I'll say, well, that sounds like a Gugwe. I don't know what other people are saying. Their ideas are of these creatures. I kind of changed my stance on there being an actual race of them, as opposed to something that could have just been thrown together in a lab. I don't know. I just know that there are no experts in this field, and there's people that claim that they know all about the Gugwe, and they know all about the Wendigo and all this other crap, and then they just don't. They're just good at talking. But Jennifer Metzger is talking. She says, Mr. Wilson, I don't know, this creature was flesh and blood. 100% I heard it coming up from the creek bank. It was running from something, but jumping from tree to tree. See, that's weird. Barton Nunley had told me a story, and I think he's probably told it on the show, about a black panther being chased out of a holler by a really large wolf-like creature.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought of Dick when he was explaining it.
So anyway, we're moving on. We're going to move on to the next story.
Well, quick question. Do you think maybe it's possible because you have these Native Americans that can transform into, skinwalkers basically. Do you think it's possible for them to push that onto someone as a curse? Like, do it against someone that they dislike to give them the curse of skinwalking? And, can you imagine, finding out, that you just suddenly are able to do that now? It would basically ruin your life. Do you think that that's what some that we see running around that are fighting it and they can't really control it, and it seems like it's more feral and unstable is because they're cursed or whatever?
You mean somebody has it's like a curse?
Like a literal let's say a native someone who's already a skinwalker who transforms already sees and gets treated incorrectly by some poor sap. So then they're like, I'm going to turn this guy into a skinwalker without his consent and just do this to him to ruin his entire life. Because he knows how painful it is, and it's probably a lot easier if you accept it. So imagine if you're fighting it all the time. It'd be a curse. So do you think maybe some of the ones we see running around are that's what they are? Anthony's gone. I'll move over right here.
That's why we keep that chair, even though it's all beat up, because it's very comfortable. But it's not very aesthetically pleasing, so we're going to have to get another one.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So we have another story that I wanted to tell, and I got, like I said, a bunch of them, but these were really good ones left over from Halloween. Trying to figure out which one I'm going to do here. Okay, so I got time for another one.
Well, we don't the cloak story, right? Have we done that one?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that one. I got a story about cloaking. Somebody said you're talking Lugaroo now, a curse. It's not just the Lugaroo or the Rougarou that would be a curse. I mean, I think that there is more to this whole thing than just being... So Scorpion weighed in on his opinion.
Could he?
Yes. Okay, before we move on, though, let me say this. I will say this. There is something to these stories of these creatures being kept, maybe coming from the inner earth as a species, and maybe being kept and used, and they've never been human, whatever. But there could be something like a gene or something that could be injected, or a person could be infected with it to make them become that. That's why it's always been considered like the curse or whatever. But I've stood by what I've said about the Anunnaki and the possibility that they could have created the Dogman as a guardian or gatekeeper of such to guard between the worlds. Give me your opinions, guys, in the chat. Just, before we move on here.
Well, isn't that the whole point of that movie Underworld or whatever? Is like there's the species of dogmen are like werewolves, and then there's the ones that can actually transform.
Well, okay, so I got two things we could talk about here. One, we could talk about the cloaking creature, or we can save that for next week. And I can tell you about a dream that I had. But I don't know if we have time for both. But the dream-like state that I was in, I could talk about that. I saw these weird creatures. It's definitely a crazy story. And I may have told this story on the show in some capacity before, but I think it bears telling on this one because it kind of goes and it coincides with what we were talking about, the giants and weird creatures and just whatever. I don't want to say I wasn't as in the same. I don't know how to say it. How do I put this in words? I wasn't in the same frame of mind, and I wasn't in the same consciousness spiritually as I was when I saw what I thought was a Nordic giant. I was in another state of consciousness that was like what I call dream world or dreamland. I believe it was. I was talking to Steve Stockton about it one day or something. It was either him or Josh Nanokia, but we were talking shop, and I remember talking about that dream state. Or maybe it was, you know what, I can't remember. It might have been Tony Merkel. It was one of my fellow podcaster friends, and we were discussing being in a dreamlike state. So if it was you and you're listening, tell me, because I remember you guys telling me a story, but I don't want to tell your story because I don't remember exactly who it was because I talked to so many damn people and I can't remember. But I remember this story, and let me tell this story, and if I have time, then I will tell the other story, which is the cloaked creature, because that's a crazy story too, and that's a long one, so I might have to tell that one next week. And then I have that one. I have a black-eyed kid story that were all pretty show-worthy, and then there was another one. Let me write these down so I can go back and research it, because I have the notes for those right here. I just got to make sure that I write these down. Bear with me here, folks, because my handwriting is terrible. And I never told that vampire, story because I don't know if that's what you would classify that as. And I thought about it if I did another vampire episode that I would talk about that. But I don't know what that was. And it was just, it could have just been a weird person, but it was a very weird person. But here's the thing. I was doing a bodyguard job. I'm going to tell you this story. And I guess lucid. Yeah, somebody said lucid dreaming. I guess it would be lucid dreaming. But I was witnessing something. And so this is one of the things that happened to me. And speaking of 2003, it was the same year that I had the weird encounter with that, what may or may not have been a vampire type being or whatever. I was doing a bodyguard job for someone was being threatened. Her husband was starting to kill her. Now, I knew her husband before I knew her. And I knew her brother before I knew her. But her brother reached out to me and said her husband was a very violent guy, and he was. He was a very rough individual. He wasn't from the United States. He was from a place where if a woman steps out of line, well, that sucks because they can do whatever. So let's put it that way. And he was an aggressive and violent person. I had worked with him a little bit, and he had never been rude or disrespectful to me, but he was not above striking her and doing things to her, which he had done. And so she reached out to me through her brother and said, "Hey, would you be willing to do a bodyguard job for me? My current boyfriend is worried when he goes, because he traveled all the time to East Texas and back, and he would fly back and forth. And he's worried for me being alone. So she hired us, me, Scorpion, Diablo, and Squid, to bodyguard her, and we would take shifts, 2 people in the house, and then there'd be 2 people. And it was a pretty lucrative gig, and her boyfriend at the time had a lot of money, was rich, so he hired us. And the first week we were there, nothing happened. Eventually, this man did come and try to get into the house, and I had an altercation with him, which didn't last very long, and it really didn't even go very far. He saw me and was like, "Okay, she's got security for real." And I just told him to leave, and that was the end of it. But there was an altercation that started until he realized it was me, and then he stopped. But that being said, I believe, even though it was a very new house and they were the first people to live in it, I believe it was haunted. I did have another guy that worked there with us part-time that would work the day side for about 4 or 5 hours because there was a gap, and he claimed to have seen a spirit there. Now, I fell asleep. It was one of those big houses that had like two living areas. It was a 4-bedroom house, but it had 2 very large living areas. And the one living area downstairs, I fell asleep. They didn't have any TV or anything down there, and there was no electronics, and I kind of liked that, so I was just like, I would hang out down there while her and the kids were upstairs, whatever. And I would let Scorpion or D post up upstairs because I like the solitude of being downstairs and being alone. I know, I'm just like that. But I was down there, and it began to rain pretty heavily, and I fell asleep. And so... and it wasn't a big deal. We took turns, and so I think I was working that night with D, and he was upstairs. And I said, "Well, I'm going to go to sleep. I'm going to take my nap downstairs, and you can have the upstairs and watch TV or whatever the heck it is that you want to do." And so I went and laid on the couch, and I went to sleep. And then I woke up, just woke up quick, drenched in sweat, and just freaking out because I had what I can only describe as like a remote viewing session. I don't even know what the words are, how to put it in words. I saw these beings that were blue. They were probably 9 feet tall. I'd say anywhere between 8.5 to 10 feet tall, probably somewhere in anything in between there. They weren't all the same height, and they were inside an enclosure. This enclosure was surrounded by tall, like 12 to 14 foot high reinforced fences. You could see like double layers, concertina wire, It was electrified, everything. I could see all of this, and you could see on these corners posts with guys with machine guns, like 50 caliber machine guns. And I was witnessing this. And there weren't a lot of these creatures. I would say probably like 30 of them. And they were all like in this, like what seemed like a yard, kind of like a prison yard, you know? And then you could see like a cement building with this reinforced like pillars on it and stuff, which I assume that's where they were housed. And they were doing some sort of dance. Now, what I mean by that is like they were stomping their feet and moving side to side and then going up and down and then doing it again and again. And it was so bizarre, but it was like it was very real to me, and it was very ritualistic. And you know how when you're dreaming, the dream kind of can go and become weird and starts becoming all abstract, and then you float into another dream. Yeah. Next thing you know, you're swimming in like chocolate chip ice cream or something. It wasn't like that at all. It was like I was being shown this, and it was like something. There was like something else there with me, and they were like, witness this. And I was like, why am I witnessing this? Being close to those creatures was terrifying. And as I got up close to one of them, I knew that they couldn't see me in a physical sense, but it sensed my presence. And when I got up close to one of these things, it was like, I think it was Zane or one of you guys sent me like a picture of one from some game or something, and it had like white hair with little horns, and it was blue, and it had like braids or something. It's the closest I could come. It didn't look exactly like what I saw, but it was the closest I could come to that. So whenever I had Roger on the show, and he began to talk about Fort Campbell, and then when we began to talk to Martin Groves, when he was on the show talking about the dogman, the creature that killed the guy, and all of that. And then subsequently multiple people that I've talked to who claim that these things are being held in facilities, and the remote viewers that have said these things, which there's been more than one. It was like I was being shown, hey, these things were real. They're being held in these facilities. This is a race of beings, of creatures that are not human. They're definitely not a Bigfoot of any type, and they had horns. And they had horns that kind of went out like this, kind of like if you ever seen a bachelor bull buffalo, like from Africa, they call them Cape buffalo.
Yeah,
you've never seen those, like videos where lions or
the Cape buffaloes, yeah. Where the horns are kind of like
eyebrows.
Yeah, they're kind of like the Raleigh Fingers mustache.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of like that. Yeah. Their horns didn't curl back. Like there were a couple of them that did, and some of them had bigger horns than others, but they were horned beings. And they were very tall. And like I said, the tallest and biggest of them was in the front. There was one that was kind of doing the dance or whatever you want to call it. I say dance because I don't know what else to call it. But it was like an interpretive dance or something, and they were doing the stomping of the feet, and there was this loud bass like boom, 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 boom. I just remember it doing that over and over again. And when I was sitting there and I was watching this, and as I got close to one of them, you could, by looking at this creature, it looked like it smelled terrible, but because I couldn't smell anything, I was in a spirit form. But it sensed my presence, and it kind of was like looking with its eyes, like there was something there, that it was seeing me. And so I kind of wondered, and it kind of, to me, ties in with the whole cloak thing, like what if we look cloaked to them when we are in that astral projective plane?
Yeah, and we're the paranormal phenomenon in their world.
Yeah. And this thing definitely was a physical realm, and these were physical beings, or at least they were stuck in a physical form. And I fully believe that. Thank you for that donation, Mammy J. Hall. We appreciate any and everything that you can do for us, folks. Donations are not expected, but they are very, very appreciated. A face in the crowd says, you need to speak to my 6-year-old niece's experience with combination and horned beings. Looked burnt in places. That's a crazy story. I mean, I say crazy as in it's a pretty interesting story. But anyways, these beings were moving back and forth, and then I just woke up, and I was glad to be awake. I was like, thank God. And the first thing I did was just get down and pray to God, and I just was like, what was that? Why was it that I saw those things when I was asleep in that particular house, which I think had weird stuff happening? I had a nightmare when I was upstairs in one of the guest bedrooms there too. And I couldn't remember what it was. I just remember something coming into the room, and I knew it was a ghost, but I couldn't see it. And then the door closed, like slammed, and I woke up and the door was closed. And I got up because I thought it was one of the children, and the children were asleep along with the woman that we were bodyguarding. We were bodyguarding her and her children because he was trying to get the children. And so, yeah, it was just, I don't know. It was weird. Now, Scorpion is reminding me of another time we ran into supposed vampires. No, that was a vampire cult. They tried to bow down and worship us or something.
That guy who called himself Baby
Eater, yeah. And he tried to bow down to me, and I was like, dude, worship God. And I don't. That was weird. You were there?
No, I just remember y'all telling that.
Yeah, that story. Yeah,
and thinking, "Oh, how scary! You eat babies."
Yeah, well, the fact that
he
called himself that was just gross, and he exchanged information with D because, of course, back then D was insane and into satanic blah blah blah, whatever the crap it was, whatever weak sauce he was into. But Tony, your stepdad was with us that night, and he was just like, "Dude, what in the heck? Why would these people come to our table?" It was weird, and then they paid for our food. I don't know who this guy thought I was or what I was, but he was very like, I feel like I should be prostrating myself. And I'm like, okay, well, don't. I don't know why you're at my table, dude. I don't know. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about was a guy that I ran into at Travis' house. And Scorpion, I think you probably remember this story. The guy had a weird pointy head. I will talk about that next week, but we're out of time tonight. And folks, the other stories I have will go on too long, whatever. So I hope you enjoyed this continuation of Halloween. We had a lot to talk about, a lot of things to go over, and a lot of things to deal with. And somebody says, I've heard NDEs with those tall horn beings. Yeah. Somebody said, did you run into vampires or vampires LARPing? It depends on which case you're talking about.
It's talking about the one where the second one.
Yeah, the one where we were eating dinner at a place called Kirby Lane down on the drag here in Austin. I think those people were just wannabe vampires. Then again, a couple of them did look kind of weird. They were like really, really, really wispy thin, and they had weird looking like skin.
Well, yeah, but
they could just be because they don't go out in the sun.
I was gonna say, they probably did it to themselves.
They look malnourished,
so
they needed to be eating some people pretty quick there to.
Yeah, they buy a steak and they stick it full of syringes just to suck out all the blood.
Well, I mean, they could have been LARPing, but they could have also kind of like been on to something, but just not quite there yet. In which case it would still be considered like LARPing.
Yeah, because it starts from somewhere. Even a skinwalker was a human that decided to go make bad decisions. I mean. Anybody who makes those kind of bad decisions, you're not going to want them financially planning for you either. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I had a friend, I say a friend, he's a Facebook friend or whatever, that said that he had a mortgage broker who claimed that he was he could transform. And I said, okay, so this guy's handling your money and he's made the decision to become part of the dark side. Well, maybe you shouldn't be letting him touch your money. I don't know. But anyways, folks, that's all the time we have for tonight. We got to run. We got a bunch of stuff we got to do. And we got to remember, if we have to cancel a show or two maybe this month, we're not real sure, or more likely next month, because we're going to be in the process of moving. Don't hold it against us, folks. We definitely like what we do. We want to do this, and we got a lot of stuff to talk about. There's no shortage of stories. Here's another one for you. I think I have enough stories now to do one on robots. Yeah, and when you say that, when you say, hey, We're going to talk about robots. People are like, robots? That sounds crazy. But I have gotten stories of people who have had encounters with what they believe were robotic entities. Here's a quick teaser. This happened in St. Louis, not in St. Louis, Kansas City, Missouri. And this was right outside of Kansas City, Missouri. And well, I say right outside. They live outside of, but this happened in Kansas City, Missouri at the time. And this girl was a teenager, and she had a friend over. And she believes that one of her friends, that when she was growing up, was not a real person. And the way that she convinced me that maybe this could be a possible thing, and this was 2 or 3 years ago, first time I got this story. I had another person that reached out to me that happened in Ohio. And this happened outside of Cleveland, and it was in a suburb. And this person, another female, had claimed a very similar story, and I thought, this is crazy. But this person, they saw something come out of one of the girls had saw something come out of one of her friend's arms. Another one, she claimed that when she was asleep, this weird, like, electronic thing kind of went and came out of her eye, out of the side of her eye.
She was friends with a Terminator.
So you're thinking it's a cyborg of some kind, or maybe it's an alien technology that she doesn't know about. But at one point, when her mother was talking to her, she said that she began to, like, stare straight ahead and almost looked like she was, like, unconscious. But her eyes were open, and when she sat up and began to talk, her voice sounded metallic. Like, now, that's like borderline demonic possession type stuff. But the problem is, and I'm not downing other researchers or other podcasters or authors, but one of the things you got to understand, though, is so many people, they have a wheelhouse. You know what I mean? And if they're given a story and it doesn't fit into that wheelhouse, they choose to willfully, ignorantly, as I call it, throw out multiple details that don't fit into their particular wheelhouse. Yeah. That's why I think it's best if we as researchers, we're all willing to go the extra mile and to take people's stories. And even if you're considered a dogman researcher or a Bigfoot researcher or a UFO researcher or a ghost researcher, do us the favor in this community. Do us the favor and you pass it on. If you're not willing to take the whole story, you just want to take your little cut and go on, which is what everybody's doing, pass it on to me so that I can tell the entire scope of the story, because I'm not a master storyteller, but I'm pretty good at bringing it all together and telling the whole story. That's kind of what I do. That's my thing. That is my wheelhouse. When you give me a story, I promise you I'm not just going to cut it and leave little bits and pieces, and let you figure it out, I'm not going to, tell you some weird stuff and just leave it open-ended, I'm not going to do that. I hate those shows where they just leave it open to you to figure out what the heck is going on,
Yeah, I think it does a disservice to both the witnesses and the fans / fellow researchers to pretend like these different phenomena are isolated unto themselves, and there's no interaction or connection between the two. It's mental laziness is what it is, really, because if you take the stance that there could be connections between these two, or between these 2, 3, 4 different phenomena, then you come up with a lot more questions that need to be answered, when it's easier to just say, oh, this experience is just that, and this cryptid over here is just that, and this spiritual phenomena over here, that's just that, and it's compartmentalized. Each one is compartmentalized unto themselves, but that's the simple answer, and it's comforting to come up with these simple answers, because it's a strange world, and trying to understand, not understanding it is what terrifies us. But we have to be willing to be scared and be a little bit taken out of our comfort zone, and come up against some questions that we may not have answers for, because every wrong observation, every wrong answer that you throw out there, if you're willing to accept that it's wrong, then you're that much closer to the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, and Damus Marr says, are these robot stories recent? Yeah, some of them are, some of them aren't. I've got several that run the gamut. I didn't think I had enough to go and do a show, and then we started talking about robots the other day, and I was like, that's interesting. And so I went over it with Nelly, and I think with you, Tony, and then I said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and go back and look and see what I got, and there's a whole bunch of them in there that apparently Tony just thrown in the garbage because he hates robots.
Well, I know that eventually the robots are going to take over, and I didn't really want to be a part of like you guys talking about them, so that when they pull it up later on and it looks bad on my record.
Well, he wants to be their friend because he plays a lot of their video
Exactly.
games.
So I'm just gonna, stay on their good
he
side.
plays games with like a lot of AI bots, like artificial intelligence, and so he doesn't want them to not be his friend because those are his best friends.
I'm very close to those
Skynet
two.
takes over. He's hedging his bets, folks.
He
He
wants to be on the winning side.
You got an ally on me. I mean,
you're going to be the guy that sells us out.
I won't sell you out. I just want to participate.
So we're going to call you George S. You're
I'll
going
be
to
on the,
sell us out to the.
I'll be over there on the nice clothes.
Oh, okay.
Getting fed and stuff while you guys are out
Paying robots to go to
looking
cities and
homeless,
protest.
fighting in their wars.
Yeah,
And then
that's
when you guys eventually win, I'll be there like, yeah, we all did it.
Robot lives matter. Yeah.
72 robots.
I'm just playing the win.
72 robots when you go to hell. Somebody said, do I think Santa Claus is a cryptid? No, I do not. Funny joke, though. Ha, ha, ha. No, he's not. I can tell you this. I personally am not going to bow down to Skynet. Okay?
And I appreciate that
Now,
about
Anthony
you.
made a good point. He says that umpires behind the home plate are obsolete and that we need robots to do that job, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Okay. Well, by that same thinking, we're all obsolete, and robots could probably serve you a better set of fresh fries than you could get at most fast food places.
Yeah,
I agree.
But I'm very selective about which jobs I believe robots should replace us in. And yeah, the guy serving cold fries, replace him, and the umpire giving the Phillies or the Yankees or whatever team a completely huge strike zone,
Yeah.
and us a little sliver of a strike zone. Replace that guy's job.
Pitches in the dirt.
Here's my
Strike!
thing. Any sports where
NFL
you can
referees.
control it based on the rules, that's where I would replace with robots, because then you could have actual fairness if it's just it's a robot. Anything where you can be corrupted like that, then you could just replace those with all robots, because then you need something that you could rely that's partial, and I guess that's not really true either, because they could just get hacked or whatever.
I don't know. I mean, but joking aside, like I do think that there is actually a very real potential connection between like AI or like modern electronics, like technologies, and spiritual energies. Because if you, and I mean it's just something that I've mulling over. But if you look at the seals of Solomon, like the different seals that were supposedly given to him, and to be used to bind demons. Yeah, to make them do his bidding. If you look at those symbols and you compare them to a modern day schematic or blueprint for like a circuit board or microprocessors, some of those symbols are almost exactly the same. And they look very similar. So it could be that what Solomon was given, those seals weren't actually seals to be drawn or something. That they could have been like schematics for an ancient technology that it was used to bind spiritual energies. And,
Yes.
and maybe that's what AI it could be potentially used for today.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this, folks, and I'm going to take it out onto another level. When I was younger, one of the things that stopped me, somebody asked me, they said, why don't you use Dragon Speak to write your book? Well, one of our aunts, Anthony, had an issue with that when one of our cousins was a child, not because they're not that old now, but there was something that was saying things on the Dragon Speak, which terrified me because I was like, this thing was talking. And it was typing words in Spanish that were like, I'm going to have this child, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. And we were like, what the heck is this? It's pretty creepy, and it freaked me out. And for a while there, I just wouldn't use it because I was living in a place where something could happen. I've always believed that AI, robots, all that other stuff that could be anything that could be a vessel and used by the Anunnaki or their descendants of these beings could very well be something that could be manipulated. And I've often wondered, and people have asked me this as of late a lot, if we are in this matrix and maybe at some point we all agreed to be in it and we don't remember agreeing to it. And then I thought, well, I know me personally would never agree to go into any program and be a part of a simulation. I'm sorry. There's no way in hell. You'd have to kill me 1,000 times before I could. There's no way that I could ever agree to that. So I don't buy into that. But it is a weird thing to ponder. And I do believe that technology was being used on a grand scale going way back. And that we're now starting to kind of catch up. But we're nowhere near that level. I had somebody that remote viewed Thought, the tablets of Thought.
Yeah.
And he used the emerald tablets to create the pyramids, and they were watching him, and he was a giant, and he was using what looked like an iPad. Not an iPad in the way that we would know of one as, but he's like using it as just a touch screen and then moving it holographically off of the screen to use it to build these things. Whether that's to be believed or not is left to you, the listener. But I will say this, dude, there are people absolutely who've had encounters with robots. I believe that Anna Choate, she was on my show talking about the haunting of Fox Hollow Farms. And I believe that she had with her boyfriend at the time, a encounter with what was probably a robot, some sort of scout. And I've got stories like that. And when I went back and I looked, especially when I went to the one-offs, I was actually kind of ticked. I don't know who did it. But anyway, a bunch of stuff got stuck into the one-off file, and I'm going like, these are not one-offs. These are just things that don't fit into some little box, the oddball accounts. But when you take them as a whole, there's a bunch of oddball accounts, and they're not really oddball accounts. They actually correspond with several others. So you start to get into this whole weird... And then somebody says here, a lot of people in Upper Echelon Society practice Kabbalah, which is the origins of sorcery of Solomon. No. Yeah, well, yes and no. He says, I'm sure they're weaving the occult in everything they do. Yes, I agree with that. The sorcery of Solomon actually predates the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah was written long after the reign of Solomon, so it's back. You kind of got it, but you kind of got it backwards. When you start to stimulate, he says, I used to work for a company called Fox Hollow. That's weird. He said something back here, too, that was even weirder. If y'all can help me find it. What did he say? Stimulate said...
Let's see.
Said something earlier. A robot shares in place of my husbandly duties.
He said the seals are keys.
Yeah. There were some things that he said earlier. It says, I've heard the metallic voice sound before. It's really strange sounding. Yeah. One of my former girlfriend's friends told me a weird story. And but because that ex-girlfriend was very jealous of that girl, I was never able to finish getting the story because if I looked at her, my face was supposed to melt like Raiders of the Lost Ark or something because I was staring at her hard or some weird whatever crap, whatever. So anyway, she told me a weird story, though, that she woke up to a very metallic sound, and it was very robotic, and she saw what she thought was something float across from in her dining room going across her bedroom door, and it said something like, come to me, but it was like, come to me, like a very robotic sound. And so she jumped up, and she wasn't one of those like wilting flower type people. This girl was pretty crazy. She had like a machete by the side of her bed, which... What female shouldn't have a machete or a bat beside her bed and a gun too? But she jumps up and grabs it and runs into the other room and there's nothing there. But it was like coming out of a dream, and then later on, it's like, you have those dreams and then later on you remember the dream. And she said that she was driving along and it hit her. The dream that she was having was of some weird robotic type thing that was trying to put something that was coming from its hand into her where her heart was. and she was like fighting it and woke up, and then saw something like float across that looked like a probing droid with its legs bent backwards, which is something I've heard of before too. Some people that ran into one of these things in a national forest in Yosemite. So anyways, we could go on and on and on, folks. We got things to do. We got to go. Astros won the World Series. Mic drop. Let me get it. Well, you get the point. That's
a sad mic drop.
okay. I was trying, but it's being held by robotic stuff here. Okay, so there you go.
Just grab the stand and then slam it to the ground.
Astros won the World Series. 4-2. You lose, Phillies. And hopefully your Eagles will lose too. I'm out. Good night.
Peace.